if you ask the judge, like I said before, you ask the judge, well, what do you mean by those words? The judge is inevitably going to tell you, oh, you need to get yourself a lawyer because I'm not here to practice law or explain the law to you. But the reality is you need to ask that judge to go right back to it and say, well, wait a minute, though. So you're asking me to go and get an opinion of somebody else to tell me what you mean by this word? I want to know what you mean. Because I can just pick anybody. What about this guy back here in the corner of the gallery right now? Should I ask him what you mean by this word? Because wouldn't it be the same thing as just asking an attorney?
And another thing to perfect is you want to ask the court and not the judge. You want to always speak, for the court to clarify.
Right.
And that way you don't have a separate party like the judge acting as two things, the judge and the court, and get the court's opinion, get the court's presence on it, ask for the court to clarify, not the judge.
Well, that's true too. Yeah, because they're always acting as the court. But that when I was in law school, that used to just blow my mind. And I'd work with the professors every once in a while, be like, "Are you okay? The court or the judge? Because are we talking about the building? Are we talking about that one room? Are we talking about the chairs and the wood bench and all that? What are we talking about when you say the court?" Well, it's the judge. Okay, well, it's this one guy's opinion. It wasn't the court ruling on something. It was just one man that puts his pants on like you and me.
Correct. And that's why you always speak to the court and not the judge.
Yeah. But, again, the one thing that, because they are just another man, when you can keep those judges in check. Like I was saying earlier, if a judge makes a claim, you ask that judge to put surety up for that claim. That'll keep them in check. Or you can do it a nice way and ask them, are you sure you want to be making any claims that you'd have to put surety up for?
Even better, ask him to identify the surety for his claim. These are the phrases that will keep you in equity. Just kindly ask the court to identify it. It's that simple. Just please have the court identify the securities associated with that claim.
Yeah, that'd be a good way to do it too. But this is where I say, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, and find the best way that suits you the best. But yeah, but this all comes from practice too. Practice makes perfect. So when I first started doing this, I didn't know shit. That's why I got chucked in a cage 7 times. But I eventually got them running.
Y'all are so intelligent.
Well, it's because we read a lot.
Read a lot and been through a lot.
Can't you? So can I not remove the minor disabilities from my account by sending in age and majority attestment to?
No, because you can't. Because why? That trust is always going to be disabled. It is a legal fiction. Every legal fiction is disabled. It cannot speak for itself. It is deaf, dumb, and mute. It needs agent. Now, you can send anything you want in that you want. That doesn't prove you're competent. You can put anything on paper. Does that prove that you're competent?
And what it looks like is it's a trade. You take you out of the picture and you hand them the agent that is handling that affair.
Yes. How many times have I told you you're the agent for that trust? That's the
and that's how you have to represent when you speak for it, because it's a particular person. So
and you're speaking at it as an agent of that, and not as a person of substance or a man of substance. And as soon as you confuse it, and a man of substance start talking as an agent, you are the agent now, and you're the surety. But as soon as you keep and speak the words that the agent for that particular agency, because how many agencies are there? There's universal agents, right? There's what? Special agents and general agents.
Now, Eric, let me correct you. You misspoke.
Go ahead.
And I know you misspoke, and I know you didn't mean to say it. The agent is never surety for the principal.
Oh gosh, yeah.
You said the agent becomes surety.
Yeah.
No, as long as you're speaking as the agent, you never are liable.
Yeah. What I meant to say is you become the surety when you remove the agent.
Yes.
It needs an agent. That's what it's begging for in law and equity. And know something. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say.
Well, and know something. Probate is a tool because their default jurisdiction in probate is equity.
Right. And what I was just going to say is the way that you remove the agency is when a judge asks you, "Are you such and such legal name?" and people say yes. Because it's at that point that you just declared yourself to be, like I said before, you declare yourself to be government property because the name belongs to the government. So you just declared that you're the name, that you're all one and the same.
And a perfected way of saying that is identifying yourself as the first and middle name, and you say your first and middle name, and then you say surname and house of, and then you name the last name. And it's a very particular, simple thing to do that can change everything when you start recognizing your first and middle name when you're called, and then let them know that your surname and house of, that it was, that is that name that they're looking for. And as soon as you do that, you just showed agency. You just did.
I've heard that if you say I'm from the family of or of the family of, it does the same thing.
House of, family of. Yep.
Yeah, I've not applied those myself in a court, so I couldn't say with first-hand testimony, but I've heard that to be true.
Yeah, but in the books, it's used a lot, the word surname. And so I like to tell people who are new to it to just use that. My name is first and middle, surname, such and such. And that clears the way for your agency. Right there.
Yeah, and the surname is just a little play on the so-called words for people that didn't recognize it. The surname is your surety name. It's the same spelling for the first three letters of sir and surety. And most people don't recognize that, but yeah, that's your surety name. They've changed the pronunciation a little bit to make people think that this is a little bit something different, but no, it's your surety name. That's why it's
it's not yours, it's the. It's the surety, not yours. Again, this is a serious claim. If you say it's yours, you want to say it is the, or if it appears to be. There's an appearance. Go back to the canons and use the words the appearance, because that way you're not confrontational.
Well, always be peaceful with your adversaries. Most people don't want to do that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Most people don't want to be peaceful. They want to combat. Then you wonder why they get mad at you and you get screwed. I mean, gosh.
That's why I tell people to go into those courtrooms with love in their heart. Love for everybody, the judge, everybody. And if you're dealing with a criminal case, the DA too. Have love in your heart for the DA. That may not be easy. I know. I did go in and have love for everybody in general, just the world in general, because if I focused on the judge and the DA back then, I still wanted to rip heads off and shit down the hole.
Well, guess what? Didn't Jesus say to love thy neighbor? Who's your neighbor? They are your neighbor.
They are.
Your neighbor is not because they're living beside you.
Yeah, the neighbor is everybody in town. Everybody around.
So if you want to fulfill the royal law, why do you think I picked the term Boslikos Nomos? Go read James 2:8.
So, yeah, that being said, go in with love in your heart, do what's best for everybody. And you obviously can't know what's best for everyone. It's impossible to know what's best for everyone. But if you're doing everything with love in your heart, with love as the intent, no matter what turns out, it's going to be pretty hard to go wrong as long as you're always leading with love as your intent.
Yeah, when I had that ticket for the mud flap, I was missing a mud flap on my trailer. I took it all the way to trial because why did I take it to trial? Because the states do not have the authority under the supremacy clause to be writing a ticket for a missing mud flap on my trailer, because the FMCSA regulations don't mandate a mud flap, right? And it was a $50 ticket, and I go to court. I go to traffic court, and I got a stack of papers. The judge don't know that I have a Westlaw account, so I'm bringing all my documentation with me because I'm gonna fight this all the way to the top if I have to get this law done away with, right? So we get through the traffic court thing, and when I bring up constructive fraud, he very quickly shuts me down and says, $50 fine, you can appeal it within 10 days. I go right out to the clerk, appeal it, take it to trial. And when we go to trial, the judge, the state of Virginia moves to dismiss it upon payment of costs, and all I said was, I'll appeal it. The judge said, well, what kind of arguments you going to make? I said, constitutional arguments. And he said, can I get everybody done first? I said, yes, sir. But through that whole trial, I looked at the judge and said, Your Honor, I've remained nothing but honorable this entire case. He looked at the state trooper and said, is that true? And the state trooper was just dumbfounded. He said, surprisingly, yeah, the whole entire time he's been nothing but honorable. The traffic stop, he never was unpolite. He treated me with the utmost respect and even thanked me for the ticket for letting him know. And the judge just like, wow. And what did the judge end up finally doing after all of my arguments? He said he dismissed it without payment of cost. See, a lot of times when you go in as honorable and peaceful, they have the ability to decide how to treat you.
Well, of course,
Papa, are you playing with bubble wrap?
Actually, no, I was just making a little bit of water noise. I had a sink going. I was rinsing off a cutting board because I just put a nice half a brisket on the smoker. I'll take a picture and show y'all what I've been doing. Come on, baby.
Man, what I would do for some brisket right now.
It's gonna be good.
So wait, hold up. Hey, let me come out. All right, no. I'm just some gabapentin, so I'm kind of delirious. But essentially, if I come into a credit union acting as the agent for my protected person and in the best interest, looking to securitize and pay to the order of the Treasury the promissory note as a financial charge on the face of indebtedness, I'm not legally allowed to do that.
Not sure.
That's what I'm saying, because it says right there in the U.S. Code. I mean, it's like, it's all about the president. Like, the president of the bank knows what's going on, right? Like, he's not stupid.
Oh, it would seem to me that just like with judges, the bank presidents know exactly what's going on. They have to. It would seem to me they would be impossible for them to do business of the day without. That's just my opinion, because I don't have any specific thing that can point right to and say, well, this is exactly it, and this is how they know it. No, I don't know. I don't have that. But it's based on the knowledge that I do have, the things that I have learned over the years, with in school, out of school, in the courtroom. It would seem to me that it would be impossible for anybody, and dealing with some of these creditors too, that bank residents have to know what's going on, especially if they're trying to deal with somebody like myself. Because if they did, they couldn't continue to do business to the day. It would seem impossible, at least in my own opinion. So,
I like being honorable because everybody wins and they can tell that you're intelligent and have prowess as a supportive member of society. by which does not deserve punishment, as you have the interest of the people and others in mind. You're not nefarious or evil or looking to harm others in any way, shape, or form. Only provide remedy.
Yeah. Well, that's the big thing with staying in honor. The more you're in honor and not proving yourself to be not only a so-called threat, but a belligerent, then you're pretty good to go. And, you know, I do things different than a lot of people do. And part of the reason why I don't do a lot of stuff with paper is because when I was dealing with the legal issues, I did a ton of paperwork. I filed motions. I did this. I did that. I was making it snow in the DA's office, and to no avail. In fact, my work was reviewed by several attorneys and a few other people in the so-called legal industry. They all agreed that it was very strong. Should have actually shut shit down with no issue, but didn't. And that kind of made me a little sour on paperwork. At the same time, I had done several different things, such as attempting to do the whole UCC1 financial filing and all that. And I got shut down on everything I did, and I was pretty certain that I did it all right. I even attempted a couple things a couple of times, trying a couple of different things, and got shut down on so much that eventually I just stopped doing a lot of paperwork. And the reality is I started doing things more verbally and started getting more results, more success, doing things than I was doing via paperwork, which is one of the reasons why I had to actually think good and hard before I started doing this whole thing with the mortgage company, because like I said, I haven't had a lot of success with doing paperwork, but this one I decided, I thought long and hard about it. I did my studies, my research, and decided, okay, well, this is one that I'm going to be a claimant for a minute, and we'll try it, see what happens. So as soon as I hear from somebody that can do the e-filing for me, I'll get that filed and it'll be underway. Now it'll be up to the mortgage company to respond, and we'll see what happens from there. But yeah, doing paperwork can be very successful, and depending on who it is, like I said, there's many ways to skin a cat. I won't deny that. And many ways are very successful. Many ways are very successful. That's why so many different people have had so much success with multiple different directions of going with some of these things. So that's why I never say that this won't work or that won't work. Not at all. It seems to me that it all has worked at one time or another. Everything, including Mark Stevens and his whole asking for evidence of jurisdiction, which is the system that I was doing way back originally when I started to learn some of this stuff, and didn't have any success with his stuff. In fact, I took his 8-page motion to dismiss and turned it into an 18-page beast on steroids, plus another 13 pages of cited authority. Didn't do shit.
What's a buyer's proposal?
The buyer's proposal would be something typically in writing where they're proposing something to you. I like your car, I like your property, I propose from you for X number of so-called dollars or in trade of something.
Yeah, so when doing something like, you only got remedy showing up there in physical being.
What's that?
You got remedy showing up in physical being in the proper courts where your authority was respected versus the paper attempting to speak for you.
Yeah, more than likely that's what happened, because I basically removed myself from the name and or anything thereof, so-called birth certificates, whatever, by simply asking the right questions and or making the proper statements. But like I said, when I did it all with I'm led to believe. So I never actually made any claims that I'd have to prove.
And people love making claims.
Oh God, left and right. People love
They
to claim shit.
love making their claims and then get mad when they get in trouble.
Well, this is one of the big things too, is people love to claim ownership of everything. Fucking everything. They think that they own everything. And the reality is nothing can be owned. God did not grant ownership to anybody. He granted dominion, which is usually in control, which is all you really want anyway. All the richest people in the world will tell you, control everything, own nothing. Unwrapping the mind around ownership is one of the most relieving things could ever be. I still am a work in progress. I still say certain things like mine and or ours, whatever, in terms of possession and or such. So I get that it's not easy, but it's something that is imperative if you really want to start having peace in your heart, start realizing that you don't own anything. Nothing belongs to you. And the so-called government has told you within the legal realm that be true. They told you with the legal name, because if you're buying something with the legal name, something that doesn't belong to you, everything that you have believed you have purchased belongs to whoever owns the name that you used. If you used a so-called Federal Reserve note, you didn't pay for shit. And if you didn't pay for it, how did you buy it? And if you didn't buy it, how the hell do you own it?
Sure.
And of course, anybody with a so-called house or so-called property, just take a quick gander at your so-called tax paperwork, your county tax paperwork. I'll guarantee you it doesn't list you as an owner, it lists you as a tenant. They're telling you in several different ways, their disclosure is out there that you can't own anything. And this is
can't the president just take and confiscate everything?
Well, technically, they can take stuff, and it's called eminent domain. And the reason why eminent domain is so easy for them is because, like I just said, they own the house, they own the car, they own everything because they own the name. You use the name that doesn't belong to you, you use the name that belongs to them. Everything that you bought with, or you think that you bought, the name that didn't belong to you belongs to whoever owns the name. The element here. That's why they can just take whatever. Thor, it's all right, sweetie. Yeah, I know. Mailman. Yeah, mailman. Yeah, that's one of the biggest problems is people think that they own that name name is them. They want to identify as it.
Yeah.
And like I've talked about before, first and foremost, all names, all words were sounds coming out of the mouth before anything was ever written ink on paper. So people think, it's all about the ink on paper. No, it's not. No, it's about sounds coming out of people's mouths. And you don't address somebody in a room by writing their name down on a piece of paper and handing it to them. No, you say the name that they respond to. This is how it works.
And everybody has responded to different names from different people. I've said it before. You've got a girlfriend or a wife or a husband. What do they call you? That baby, husband, wife, honey, dear.
Yep.
You got a parent. They call you son or daughter. You got friends. They might even call you asshole. You responded. Yep. That's a name. The question is, which name are you going to use at which time?
I'm known to answer to assholes sometimes, depending on if I'm being an asshole or not.
I've answered to it too. My wife's called me that. You're an asshole.
But the reality comes down to, and the reality of the most basic bottom logic of this is, how does somebody own a sound that's coming out of somebody else's mouth? How the hell do you own that?
Do you own that person's words? Only if you agree to it.
Right. And you can't own it I mean, you just can only agree that those sound something that you answer to, and or those are words that might have something to do with you. But this is the reality of things that people don't even think about in so many ways.
But now let's take it to the other extreme. Let's say you're in court and you do understand this, and the judge gets up there all angry and yells and screams and said, "That is your name." Okay, fine, Your Honor. I conditionally accept your offer that is my name. Now, since everyone has a right to a good name, who do I send the bill to for that to the party that misused my good name?
Another way to ask something too is, oh yeah, and where is your evidence that I am liable for that name?
Yeah.
Or even just go right back to my default. Are you putting up surety for that claim?
Look, I got a friend of mine up in Illinois. She got a ticket for failure to produce an ID and driving without a license. You know her number one argument that she hung her hat on, and she ain't no slouch. She's smart. Her whole argument in that entire case is, where is the obligation that code applies to me? They never could move past that.
Imagine that. This is again proof that it is a contract. That's another way is to prove that it is a contract, because if they can't prove that you have an obligation is only through a contract.
That's right.
I was thinking about somebody told me to completely rescind the contract that I have with the DMV in a certain state and order them to delete all prior records. And immediately
don't
on notification
rescind the
thereof.
contract.
There's no reason to do that, because number one, if you try to rescind a contract, you're actually agreeing that there was a contract to begin with.
Well,
don't forget trespass of chattel papers. They're not yours, and you're trespassing on their chattel papers, trying to destroy them.
Look,
That's true.
I don't have a problem with the driver's license. I don't have a problem with you contracting.
Yeah, but if you're in a vehicle, right, if you're in a vehicle and the name that vehicle is registered to also happens to have a driver's license, then there it would be obligated to such, right?
King, one. Who owns the driver's license? Let's analyze this first. Who owns
Whichever state that is it a part of that has the bond against the estate.
That okay? Let's just look at it simple. The name on the top of it is the state of what? First in line, first in time. They own the license. The owner is the liable party. Learn how to contract with them and say, hey, 90 days before you got to renew your license, you submit a contract to them and said, look, now that I have come to the realization of all of this, and lay out your facts under the law, say, hey, this is your property. I am retaining my interest in it. But since it is your property as the trustees, you hold all the liability. But I will operate this as the agent in commerce. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
I mean, you have the right to alter your government. Isn't that what the Second Amendment says? I've talked about this before. What do the elite do? Who writes the laws? The lobbyists write the laws. Who do they represent? The elite and the corporations. What do? They are altering their government to fit their needs so they can operate business the way they want to, not the way they need to.
And then
if
somebody
they
also
have that right, so do you.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with it. Yeah. Okay, and then also another thing is somebody told me that I could get an international learner's permit within the United States.
Yeah, that's that community out there putting out a bunch of hogwash.
Well, do you think the international learner's permit is something that might be applicable in those regards because you can drive within the...
It only shows evidences that qualified, so I believe that it does help you evidence your intent to follow the law. But if you read about the law, it's only good when you're abroad, and so it's kind of that middle ground where I don't believe it's going to hurt you, and I think it's a good evidence that you're looking to follow the law, but it doesn't have force and effect like people think.
Those groups out there, it's just like you got a certain group, they have the world passport, right?
Yeah, the whole world passport shit. Nah,
Yeah.
it doesn't apply.
Yeah,
It's old.
it's these things
We
that
already
people
have a
are
passport.
putting out is because they're looking for some magic fix that will take them out of the jurisdiction. See, they've already been free. They just didn't know they were free because they don't know who they are in relation to that name. I looked up on Westlaw International Learner's Permit. Guess what comes up? Nothing.
Well, this is part of why too, when it comes down to any of this stuff, and I will state just for the so-called record that I do still keep a so-called driver's license, and the only reason being is because, especially for olive oil, she really wants me to keep so-called auto insurance and house insurance. So do those two things. I have retained the use of the so-called driver's license, but one thing that I have got outside of that, as far as so-called GovCo, if there is such a thing, is the so-called state national passport. I did do that, and I have had not necessarily success because it hasn't really been tested necessarily, but I have had very odd responses from police when that so-called passport has been introduced into the situation. Let's just put it that way. I've been treated differently than I had ever been treated before. Let's put it that way. So that is one that I would recommend. But outside of that, I stay the hell away from all government anything. Because if you use any of their stuff, it's acknowledgement of their so-called authority and contracts.
Yeah, the thing is, there's a lot of gurus out there putting out information that is absolutely bogus and crap information. That it's like you got a group of people now they're talking about do this amnesty oath. Well, the amnesty oath did apply in law at one time. Is there an authority today that shows it's still in force and effect? The answer is no. I've looked. So and I can find court cases out the wazoo where Moors and different people have done the amnesty oath, and the judges just look at it and say, whatever.
Yeah, I think the amnesty oath, could be corrupted depending upon who you give your oath to.
Well, no, you're missing the point. The point is, why are you doing a process when there is no citable authority that it has any force and effect?
Valid, yeah.
If it has no force and effect, you shouldn't be doing it. This is why these judges are calling people sovereign citizens and all of this stuff, because why? They're out there doing things wrong. This is why a lot of gurus don't like me. It's why they block me, because when I prove this to them, it kills their whole process, and then they block me because why? They don't want people knowing the truth. All they want you to do is continue to pay them.
Well, the problem.
Some could be federal agents.
Well, it's written in the Bible. I do believe that the truth will set you free, but at first it's going to make you miserable as well.
Yeah.
Because people don't like the truth. They get into cognitive dissonance. Once you start hitting people, well, I was just going to say real quick, once you hit people with something that completely contradicts their belief system, everything that they've been led to believe and taught to believe, it just blows up their little world. They don't know how to handle it. But go ahead. Hey, you.
I am just curious. Let's see. I am very curious about something here. So, hello, Lori Ellie. So how did you join this live if you're not in this group?
I don't know. I pressed a button.
But how did you join this live if you are not in this group? That's
If she has an invite link, she could have clicked the invite link. And
she does not have an invite link.
No.
I know that to be a fact.
Okay, this
Someone
is how I
has
did
a second handle that has permissions to be in.
I don't have a second handle.
Alias.
What
no,
I
if
did
she
was
has an invite link, she could click the invite link and then join into the group chat without
But
having
King,
to be a part of the group.
She doesn't have an invite link. It's
Do you
never
want me
been
to tell
sent
you how
her.
I did it?
Yeah, tell me how you did it.
On the main channel. Okay. Went into the main channel and I saw a post about truth. And I went in to read what was written in there. And when I went into that group,
okay.
it said
That's
join.
the comment section.
But,
okay, the comment
yeah,
section.
but I can.
I understand.
If you don't want me here, I can leave.
I didn't say I didn't. I was just asking because I was confused that you're not in the group. I didn't know. I did not actually know that was possible.
I didn't either. I thought it was kind of weird, but I was like, I wonder what they're talking about.
You're
and
free
actually,
to
I wanted to
stay
share.
You're free to stay as long as there is no drama. I don't tolerate drama.
Okay. I wanted to share something with you.
Okay, go ahead.
When I first got on, you guys were talking about language and words.
Yeah.
And in Texas, they have a judicial training center, and you can go on and download. It's for like the new justices of peace, and in there they very clearly say, and you can like look it up online, that they use Black's Law Dictionary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's ever, that's something that could be cited if anyone wants to, it's the full faith, right? If it's in Texas, it's pretty much anywhere.
There's actually the Supreme Court. Actually, we've got a document here that's people will occasionally ask, what's the best dictionary to have? I tell them every dictionary you get your hands on. I look at it the same way I do study in the Bible. If you're going to study the Bible, you need to go back to the original language. What was the writer's intent? And the law is the same way. That's why it's ambiguous. That's why it's interpreted, because you didn't write the law in 1933. You don't know, you're not a mind reader. You can't go through time. So what does the Supreme Court do? They got a 2.5-page list of dictionaries they use throughout the history of this country.
Yep. And if you want to start with the dictionary that was written to basically the words used in the so-called Constitution, you have to go to I believe it's the 1839 Bouvier edition.
Yeah.
For the Constitution, I actually have one of them sitting on the shelf. And in fact, I'm in complete agreement with what Preacher just said. I actually collect dictionaries. In fact, I will go to used bookstores and used book sales, especially at the so-called libraries and such, because a lot of times they will have some of these things and they'll let them go for practically nothing.
Well, I've got a folder in my Dropbox of 217 legal dictionaries all the way back to the 1600s. I've tried to upload that file in here, but it's too big. It's like, I found that out because they only allow you up to 4 gigabytes, and it's 238 gigabytes. And what I'm working on doing is I'm taking those dictionaries, and I'm going to get them put up on the website where there's going to be a page specifically for those dictionaries where people can go download them. So I got to go rename them, get their names accurate, get them all uploaded, get the page built, links put up. As soon as I get that done, I'll let everybody know.
And this is one of those things too that I go back to as far as continuing to learn things. Because for as simple as I like to keep things, I still recommend that you learn as much as you can, because the more you know, the better questions you can ask. And I don't care what it is always a better question. The more you learn, the better the questions are, because it's good, better, best. So don't ever stop learning, but keep it as simple as possible too. It's always been my philosophy. And that's after having made it as complex and complicated as I could possibly make it, not having success.
I guess she fell off now. I did not know that you could join a live if you're paying attention in the comments section on the main page. That's interesting. I did not know that. Now I know.
Who's this Caitlin Colorado?
Oh, Caitlin wanted to know if I had time to talk. She's got a situation of her own.
Yeah, when I initially got like listening to these gurus and stuff, I had never heard somebody be able to list out particular codes of law or case law or sectionalized information, personal experience and success. And the people within this community really do know that stuff like the back of their hand.
Because we study it all the time. We read it. That's why look, you're just turned 20. How many times have I got on to you? Stop playing video games and pick up a book. Because why? You have the capability to learn this. And by the time, and being you're 20, by the time you reach my age, Eric's age, Popeye's age, some of us gurus that's been in it for 10 plus years, you will be a beast. But if you don't apply it, if you don't apply yourself, you'll never achieve it.
Well, that's just it right there. You have to actually get into the game, because you can study something all day long, but if you don't actually sit down into the game and actually apply it, such as I did, from stepping into courtrooms and asking the questions, running the risk of getting chucked in a cage. Like I said, I got chucked in a cage 7 different times asking judges shit. And eventually I started figuring out the right questions to ask them. And once I did, instead of them chucking me in a cage, in fact, what judge had chucked me in the cage the most ended up started running from me. God's honest truth. I'd swear on a stack of Bibles in the face of God, and he knows that it's true.
It's like, beating a dog and then the dog grows up.
Yeah, and what does it do? Then it returns to its vomit and eats that.
Yep, there's a Bible passage that says, as a dog returns to its vomit, a fool returns to his folly. Well, it's talking about some of the shit that we're talking about right now. Because once you start to understand who you are as a player in the game, if you back even a little bit, you're the fool turning to your folly.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of everything is to figure out who you are as a player in the game. It's all a test. You're being tested at every step of the way. Go ahead.
See, some people do not like my stance when it comes to government. I take my foundation is the Bible. And if the Bible says God instituted government, then I cannot call government evil. I can call the individual evil, but not the system itself, because if God instituted, you're calling God evil. See, the one thing about the Bible where it says God instituted government, it didn't say what type of government. Man has the right to establish the type of government. That's why you have communism, socialism, capitalism. You have all these isms, because man has that right. The question is who are you going to point the finger to? The individual may be evil because the heart of man is exceedingly wicked. The government itself is doing what God ordained it to do. The more evil the nation, the more evil the government will be, because the government is nothing but a reflection of the people.
Well, too, and I believe that it was Winston Churchill that said it best, that there will be those that govern from within and those that certainly need to be governed from without. And what he was talking about is those being governed from without need government. They need people to intervene, to slap your ass upside the head and keep you in line. That's exactly what he's saying. So you can either be one that's governing yourself from within, or you can be a belligerent and have a need for government to keep you in line. It's kind of the idea behind the New Testament too. Is it's the rule book for which you're supposed to live the life. You know, one of the things that I'm led to believe is that the entire legal system is based on the King James 1611 version of the Bible, which means that that's the rule book. That's the book that we should know, and not just the Old Testament, but the New Testament. Old Testament's about punishment. New Testament's about walking the perfect path. Start walking the perfect path. The rest of it will start falling into place. And then walking the perfect path means doing as Jesus would do. Of course, Jesus didn't file any paperwork either. This is part of the reason why I go back to that too. Jesus never filed anything. He just simply asked questions. In fact, I'm led to believe that he asked more questions than was asked of him. And of course, one of the most important questions is when Pontius Pilate said, "You're the king of the Jews." And he said, "You say I am." Essentially right there, he just said, "You prove your point." Oh, so I forgot to ask you, Preacher, did you have a chance to look over that request for adequate assurance?
No, I keep freaking forgetting.
Oh, damn it.
That's the problem with me driving all the time. I got things on my wish list to do, and it's like when I do park, I've got this long list of stuff I want to get done. I've got other people I got classes I'm doing, helping people, and then something else. It's like I need to go read that freaking letter because I think we can actually maybe make it better with the resources I've got.
Oh, probably, but in fact, it was interesting. I was talking about it with that attorney the other day about potentially even redoing request for adequate assurance with the so-called third-party debt collector, but I'm not so sure that that's necessarily because of everything that I've done, but who knows? But it was nice to have that conversation and to hear from another attorney. Yeah, everything that I've been led to believe is true about the promissory note, and the banks, and all of that. That I did do things right with the administrative process too. There was essentially no other way to do it. This is the only way to do it. Any other way is just not a way, because this is the only way that you can actually walk into court and prove you did what you say you did.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, even the Bible says, look, this is the only way to get to heaven. What did they do? They mirrored the Bible. This is the only way to do certain things in the contract or administrative process. And it actually lines up with legal principles or lawful principles, depending on the word you like, that were there for from the foundations of the world.
Yeah, well, that's part of why I believe that it does seem to be true that when you look at so much of the legal system and the basic principles from which they draw, and you look at the Bible, it pretty much is a mirror of the Bible. So, it would make me truly believe that, yes, indeed, it's a fact that the Bible is the basis of the system. So, oh, and here's something though that we didn't talk about earlier, but I was just reminded earlier when we were talking about truth and facts and the ambiguity of the system, and most people would argue this until I express what I'm about to, that even truth and facts can be ambiguous. People usually say, no, it can't be. Truth and facts are solid. Because I used to think this way. I used to think that facts and truth were all like concrete, solid, great. But I had this conversation with one of the friends who's a so-called attorney. He's now in politics, but he actually achieved even so high of a ranking as the prosecutor for the city of Long Beach, the number 2 position. And he expressed it like this. They say that there's a cow out in the middle of the field. I see white, you see purple. Either one of us right, either one of us wrong. Well, could it be that we're both right? Because what we see is what we see. But let's take that to a different.
Yeah. Sometimes that is true because we're both on a different path.
Right. Now let's take this into a different situation. Let's go into the courtroom, and let's say that preacher and I, attorneys, the rest all are jury members. I show you a picture of a cow out in the middle of a field, and it's clear in this picture that this cow is white, and it's pure white. I mean, and the spots on it is pure white with pink nose. I can see that. You can see that. Preacher can see that. But on this particular day, it's preacher's job to argue that it's purple. And on this particular day, he does a better job of selling. He does a better job of convincing. And he argues to the point where you as a jury come back saying it's purple. That's the truth for that situation, for that moment in time, are that cow is purple, regardless of the fact that we can all see that it is white. That's how ambiguous the system is. And I love that part. I absolutely love it because it's not something that's to be afraid of. Quite the contrary, in my opinion, that's something to embrace. You want to embrace that ambiguity because you want to start using that ambiguity against them. It's a beautiful thing, in my opinion. You're going to say something, preacher?
Yeah, I was asking my wife a question. So Lori actually joined the live. She didn't tell the truth. She said she was going through the comment section. So we just tested that theory. She did not. You can't see it under the comment section. So what she did was apply, and she gets like 240 seconds before the bot kicks her off. That's what it is. She didn't go through the comment section because my wife's not on the live, so she should see the join feature, and she couldn't. So that's why we were testing that. Yeah. So she didn't exactly tell the truth on how she joined. But yeah, she's been known to cause drama according to some of the sources, and I will leave their names out.
So how'd she get it? How did that happen?
I don't know for sure. The only thing I can think is, since we're on the live, not looking in the chat, she must have hit the discussion button and applied.
No, I had an invite to W4's Smoking Baby chat, and I clicked the link, right? And you know how, like, once you click that link at the bottom, there's join group. I was still able to, like, join into the W4 discussion, like the chat. So I think she must have an invite link to the group, but she didn't join into the group. She just joined into the live chat.
Now, no, she does not have an invite link. I'll tell you, I deleted every single invite link that all the admins had yesterday and reset everybody's invite links yesterday. And unless they give those links out, there are no valid invite links out there. Because why? I was getting a lot of bots, you know, those foreigners those bots that have the Muslim writings and everything. They're usually a picture of some scantily clad woman trying to trap people. I was getting a lot of those that were coming in through other groups, I think. So I went through and deleted every single invite link yesterday and reset everybody's invite links. So no, it's not, she don't have an invite link. She had to be going through the discussion where you can apply now. And one of the bots gives you 240 seconds before you get kicked out. 240 seconds is a long time. That's what, 4 minutes? See, I don't mind some of these people coming in. It was like I told her, if you cause drama, you're not going to be able to stay. I don't tolerate drama. We can have disagreements, but we can act honorably in our discussions.
Yeah, drama has no place in a grown-up conversation.
I even
None
just
whatsoever.
had someone surprise me. They thanked me for my response in their group because Bill Weishaupt was kind of not being polite about me, right? So
yeah.
He's out there. He's this expert that's getting everybody free with not showing any actual proof. But everybody's running to his group, right? So I went in his group. I went in that group and I tagged him. I said, be honorable. My mother taught me if I had nothing nice to say about someone, that I shouldn't say anything at all. Not only that Jesus even stated, therefore, if you have thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee. Didn't even say sin, just aught. Leave there thy gift before the altar. Go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. And then I said, so if you disagree with me, that's fine. No one man knows all the law, but we should be able, as men, to discuss it and search out the truths. And the Spiritual Rock actually sent me a message and said, thank you for that, because he attacks me all the time. I told her, I said, look, we can disagree on things, but that doesn't give us the right to be dishonorable. I said, you have a right to your beliefs just like I have a right to mine.
Well,
said,
you and I are perfect.
Right.
You and I are a perfect example, preacher. We, like you said earlier, we've known each other for at least 9 years now. 10, I don't remember, because it's been a long ass time. That I can say for sure. And I can barely remember 5 minutes ago. So, but we've disagreed about many things throughout our relationship, and we've never once even raised our voices with each other.
That's right. I mean, I may get a little passionate, but I really do try to control my anger and not let it get the best of me, because the last thing I want to have to do is come back to you and say, man, I am sorry. I really got out of line. And because I've been known to have to do that before, because we're all human. We're going to get there. I mean, me and JW's disagreed, and even, I mean, and got into arguments, and we've had to come to each other and apologize, because we shouldn't have acted that way.
And this is part of why I do my best in any situation to de-escalate. But you want to talk about somebody with passion, there's nobody with more passion than me about this stuff. And that's part of why I do get a little live wired at times when I start to rant and rave, because I'm exceptionally passionate about this stuff, because there, in my opinion, there's only a couple things that matter. First and foremost is enjoy the moment. That's the thing that matters the most, because if you don't enjoy the moment, you're fucking yourself, because this is all you got. Love your family, love God, and don't worry about shit until somebody's in your face. That's when they go into knowing who you are as a player in the game. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the single most important thing when it comes to the Matrix. dealing with creditors, dealing with these corporations, dealing with the legal system. I don't care what it is. It's all the same, and it should be dealt with one basic plan. Now, like I said, there's many others that can work, and if whoever's doing something different, if they're having success, great, more power to them. But the way I do it is based on just the pure logic of the situation, not going on hearsay, not going on assumptions, and not going on illusion. Just the pure rock bottom of actual tangibility. Outside of that, I don't want to discuss it. And that's part of the reason why I do have the success that I do, because people in the government, people in corporations, creditors and such, they have to go on hearsay, they have to go on assumptions, they have to go on illusion. And when you remove all that, they've got nothing to go on. Not necessarily that easy, but it is that simple.
I mean, shoot, me and Cite Your Authority used to do a live show all the time, and y'all have heard us. The bunch of y'all have heard us talk over the months. I mean, we don't always agree on everything, but we still, for the most part, try to be honorable with each other.
See, there you go. Yeah, and when I say it's simple but not easy, oh, believe me, some of this stuff isn't so easy. For as simple as it might seem, it again, like I said, it's all a test, and you will get tested. Believe me, you're going to get tested. But that's part of the reason why I do with the so-called credit cards and such, because I love having them call me up, and at the spur of the moment, I got to go full onion. I'm getting tested without any warm up or any practice or anything. It just go. Come on.
It's after 5, so I can check in now. About an hour and a half.
Hey, I'm gonna be heading out, guys. It was a wonderful hearing the discussion that's going on here today. Yeah, I wish everybody have a blessed afternoon. And take care. Stay safe.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you later, brother. Now, one thing. Let's get back to Morgan. Are you still listening, brother?
Yeah, Morgan is back.
Yes, sir. My son went on a visit, so I thought I'd keep trying to learn.
Okay, great. One of the things that I was wondering, has some of this discussion helped you in starting to understand, even though, like I said, I've never dealt with family law, but has it helped you understand the system in a general sense to where you understand a little bit more as to how you fit in?
Yes, sir. More so the contract part of it, everything being a contract. I've been trying to learn about trust and how that applies as well. And then just equity, where in this regards, I'm the injured party. And so I have some complaints to file against the judge and attorneys, as well as a malpractice suit that hopefully somebody will take up and I can pursue. But this has definitely helped. I've joined a couple Telegram groups of people that are kind of interested in this, and so it's been pretty helpful.
Let me warn you, Morgan. Let me warn you, Morgan. You know, the Bible says that surround yourself with a wise counsel. If you definitely, and I stress this, if you are new to this, you should not be in 50 different groups. If you can count your trusted sources on one hand, you're in enough groups, because what happens after you get into that many groups, you're going to, just like King just left, he's in all these different groups and he's talking about what he hears. What is it doing? It creates confusion.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I agree. I'm in two. One is Nature, Spirit, and Commerce with a gentleman named Charles, who seems to be pretty knowledgeable. Yeah. But then this group is my member.
Yeah. There's a lot of gurus I don't endorse either.
And this is part of what I talk about, just keeping things really simple. And especially for, two different reasons. One, especially for newbies, because I could quickly, if I sat down and started going technical on you, started citing codes, statutes, regulations, and all this other shit, I'd blow you away. And I don't even remember it nearly as well as Preacher does, which blows me away sometimes. It just cracks me up. They got all this shit wrapped up in the head, and he still will walk all over me with the amount of stuff he's remembered. And stuff that he can cite. And again, well,
most of the people most of the teachers that I do endorse are in this group. Popeye, I'll endorse JW. Man's smart. Boris is in this group. I mean, Quasimodo don't come in very often, but that man's smart. Cite Your Authority, he left. I mean, he's smart. You've heard us. I mean, you've heard our conversations. I've got a lot of people that I will say, hey, listen to these people. Other than that, there's a lot of them out there I do not endorse, and a lot of them, there's even more that I don't know, because why? There's a lot. You can throw a rock and hit a supposed teacher that claims to have experience and know-how and do my process, and I laugh at a lot of them.
Me too. And part of the reason why is because when it comes down to what their experience is, most of them don't really actually have any.
Especially if they've never been to court.
Well, there you go. Because for somebody that's never been to court, and like I just said, I've been at least 7 times when they chucked me in a cage, and that's not every time I went. I didn't always get chucked in a cage. I was actually in the courtroom quite a bit, and you learn when you're in those situations, when you're under that stress of having that judge in front of you, and they can chuck you in a cage in a moment's notice, and the whole reason why you're in there is there's somebody called the DA that's trying to chuck you in a cage for X number of months or X number of years, and or fine you up the ass and whatever else. It's a very stressful situation, extremely stressful. And the thing that I tell everybody is that you need to get comfortable in that situation. One of the first things you need to do is come to grips with how much you're willing to deal with. If you can't handle being chucked in a cage for even one night, just go in and pay the fine and be done with it. Don't even try to do anything. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if you're really going to push the envelope and figure things out in front of that judge, you got to be prepared to be chucked in a cage. I'm going to tell you right now, you better be ready to have that happen. Because if you're not, you're going to be standing there stressing out thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get chucked in a cage. And you're trying to think of all the right shit to say and or ask and or whatever. That don't work. That don't work. Most people are so stressed out, and I know because I was one of them, that the night before court, you can't sleep. You're like smoking every ounce of weed you got and drinking every drop of booze you got, and you can't sleep. I got to the point where I could sleep in the gallery waiting for him to call the case. That's how comfortable I became in a very uncomfortable situation. And it wasn't easy. It took a long time to do that.
And Morgan, you said that you're the injured party. And a lot of times what people think, because of lack of knowledge, when the government is doing the things they're doing, yes, it feels wrong. It feels like you've been done wrong. But the one thing, when I went through that 7-year court battle with family court, fighting to save my family, do I like the judge today? No. Do I have a little bit better respect for him? Yes. Because after all these years of study, and I now see why he was doing certain things, why he was saying certain things the way he was saying it, and I look differently on it today. And nothing says I have to like him, but I do have more respect for him now. Because a lot of times what we think about the system and how it's supposed to work is totally antithetical to how it's actually working.
Well, I think that you and I have had this conversation a few times, Preacher, and that we both realized that we were the problem, that we were consenting to this shit, and we didn't even realize how we were consenting to it. And we're not only consenting and not realizing it, but like I said, we were actually creating more of a problem than there could have even been, just because we were just too ignorant.
That's what
ignorance of the law, you know.
That's what Cite Your Authority keeps talking about. All this chattel paper. We've created all of this chattel paper, this public debt, and we're not doing our job so they can balance the books. We're getting in the way of their job, and we don't even know.
Actually, meddling interlopers. We're meddling interlopers in business that doesn't involve us.
Yeah.
But see, and that's the thing, Morgan, that you have to realize, even in family court, there is things that you've already done. I can assure you that when you think back after these conversations, you're going to go, oh, shit, yeah, I did this and I did that. Where along the way, you consented. You basically entered into contracts with that judge. And one of the things, like I said before, talking about this earlier, if you claim the so-called legal name, just simply by claiming that legal name, you've claimed that you are the property of that judge. Because the judge is trustee. The judge works for GovCo. The judge is actually the trustee before you claim that name. Once you claim that name, you've now reverted trustee obligations to yourself. Most people don't realize that. When they ask, do you live at such and such address, and you say yeah, instead of saying, well, that's the address I'm known to use it or something like that, they're entering into contracts because they do what's known as minimal contacts. If you use a so-called mailing address in the area, you have a so-called phone number that's area code in that region, you have so-called utility bills or cable bills or whatever in that so-called region. These are all considered minimal contacts. This is what the judge will look at as contracts.
So does
where
me
you're
having
basically
representation,
what's that?
If I had an attorney, the attorney actually did the contract for me when speaking for me when the judge was speaking to me, but the attorney spoke for me.
Not only that, you also waive your rights when you use an attorney, because the only person that can defend your rights is you.
Yep. An attorney, when you have an attorney, you basically told the court that you're incompetent to handle your own affairs and that you're also a ward of the court. Because the attorney is actually an officer of the court whose first loyalty is to that court, not you. That's where their loyalty lies, is with the court. They're not willing to ruin their reputation with the court that their loyalty lies with.
So when I now present myself as pro se, am I creating a new contract?
Well, pro se, do you even know what pro se means?
Well, I can't be pro se because I can't represent myself.
No, they don't.
Well, you are not representing yourself. You got your social security card on you?
Yes, sir.
I want you to pull it out. How new is it? Is it fairly old, fairly new? What is it?
It's very old. It has burn marks.
Okay. What's the third sentence on your card?
Let's see.
Well, it'd be the first sentence.
No, if it's an older card, it's the third sentence. Mine is an older card.
Oh, okay. Well, they moved it back on the third sentence because one brother, his son, it's on the third sentence now.
Yeah. They move it around. They move it around.
Yeah, they do. Apparently, they move it all over the place.
This number has been established for?
No. There's a phrase on there that says this card is property of the Social Security Administration and must be returned if we request it. Okay, so that means what? That means this card, that means the name, the social, because the card wouldn't exist without that.
Yep.
Latez, there's a brother in this group that goes by Latez. He heard me say that. He called the Social Security Administration and asked them one question: who owns the name? They said, we do.
There you go.
That means what? It can't be you, because it's illegal to own people under the Ordinance of 1787, otherwise called the Northwest Ordinance. So that means if it can't be you, you've always been free. The problem is you don't know the rules to the game.
Yep.
You're representing or representing that estate, and you don't even know that. You're going in there thinking it's you, and you are saying they're done me wrong, blah, blah, blah. No, you're representing that estate, but the problem is you don't know how to operate that estate.
And you consented to everything that they've done to you. You've actually asked for it. You just didn't realize it. So you didn't actually get injured by them. You were asking for it through contracts.
Yeah, Eric J is in this group. We had a long back and forth. And he says he was blaming it on the education system. Well, they taught us this, that, and the other. I said, no, You knew this. How did I know it? Well, I said, when you knew that if you're using someone else's property, that there's rules. I mean, when you become 16 and you got your driver's license, your mom and dad, you go to them and say, "Hey, can I use your car? Is that car their property?" Yes. You knew there was rules to follow. If not, you'd be in trouble. I said, but they gave us this social and they told us it was their property, and we ignored it and thought we knew what we was doing.
Mm-hmm. This is part of why, especially some of the really old cards, it used to say you cannot use this card for identification purposes.
Well, the people chose to do the opposite. So what did the government do? They said, okay, people, you want it this way, you get it. They took that phrase off, and the people still complain.
Mm-hmm. Because the people are stupid. They're ignorant, actually, not so stupid, but
yeah, they're ignorant.
They're stupid too. They're ignorant and stupid, because stupid is somebody that knows better but still does it anyway. So the ones that aren't ignorant are being stupid because they do know better. They're just still doing it. And that would actually be certain people such as attorneys and things of that nature, because some of those people, they know some of these things, but they're still doing it because, well, like I said, they got to be loyal to the court, all this other shit. So they're trying to walk that tightrope line. So they're being stupid, and they're totally doing it. But the thing is, especially with most of your so-called attorneys and shit, they have that so-called lucrative income that they're trying to protect. So even the ones that know this shit know that they're basically screwing people over by allowing some of this shit to happen, they don't give a fuck. They really don't. Because as long as it doesn't affect their paycheck, they don't give a shit what happens to you.
That makes perfect sense, because my son's mother, so my son faced addiction from pregnancy all the way up until abandonment. And after abandonment, I just thought, it's my God-given right, to raise my son. He's my son. Her and her fiance that she found broke in twice to my house. So I ended up calling the police, and they came out and told me I had zero rights to my son, which scared me. So I started the custody proceedings. I literally just read that in my state, there is no minimum time of common law marriage, and common law marriage only requires that you are co-inhabitants and you have the, you are going to get married, or you have the intention to get married. So,
but that's
I had rights
statutory. Look, that's a statutory rule. Satan, remember, Jesus said what? Satan is the god of this world. He cannot create. All he can do is mirror. The system created this statute called common law marriage, right? Well, guess what? Go to the story of Isaac and Rebekah. At what point did Isaac and Rebekah become married in that story? The minute he took her in the tent and knew her, that was his wife. That's God's plan, not man's plan under a statute.
And see, that actually touches on something that I talk about in a basic logic sense that is almost too logical for some people, but it's reality too. When we have these people called lawmakers and cops and DAs, they act as if they're over people, over others. Well, the reality is this: if you can look up, like when I look up, if you don't see the soles of the feet of another man, how the hell is anybody over you then? How can anybody be over you if you don't look up and see the soles of the feet of another man? How is anybody over you? It seems to me that we're all standing side by side.
Right.
Where's the obligation that code applies to you when the Bible says this is marriage? The Bible doesn't say that that's your child. The Bible says that is your offspring. A child is a legal term.
And that's how I felt. I've never not had rights to them, and I just went about my business as his father until I was told that, which then wrangled me into the system, and I unknowingly contracted by petitioning the courts to instate my rights.
Yeah, I mean, you by doing that, you're telling the court you didn't have the right beforehand.
Yes,
See
sir.
the difference. There's 3 products of conception. I've proven this. The hospital only recorded the first 2 products. They didn't record the baby. That birth certificate or certificate of live birth is not the baby. They cannot prove it's the baby because they have no firsthand knowledge. This is why the Secretary of State will still take a family Bible entry as identification because they have no knowledge of who you are.
Here's something else to think about, Morgan. Let me ask you this. If, say, you happen to like the color pink, and I don't like the color pink, does my opinion apply to you? Or can you basically tell me to go fuck myself? You're going to wear pink if you want to wear pink.
Oh, yes, sir. I can wear the pink and enjoy it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to all codes, statutes, and regulations, these are nothing more than somebody's opinion written down on a piece of paper. Besides the fact that they are all offers to contract, again, they are nothing more than someone's opinion written down on a piece of paper. And they put the word code, statute, or regulation across the top of it when they rally at least 51% of their peers, so-called other lawmakers, to agree that this opinion is a good opinion so that they could put that word code, statute, or regulation across the top of it. But does the word across the top change the fact that it's an opinion?
No.
No.
Not only
No.
that, what are they? They're legislating sin or morality. Everybody has their own definition of what a moral code is, but very few people ever take it back to the Creator's moral code. I'll give you an example. They sit there and regulate smoking, right? They say it's a sin, so they tax it. And they say you can only be 21 to buy cigarettes. But show me in the Bible where smoking's a sin.
And again, this is going back to this one simple thing. When it comes down to these simple code, statutes, and regulations and such, you have to realize that if it is just an opinion, again, how does that opinion apply to you?
What about
you have
the
to
devil's...
think about it from the standpoint of how would somebody's opinion just simply apply to me? Even though they want you to believe that it's now so-called law, but yet they can't prove that it's actually a law. They'll call it practical law, which is short for practically law, but not really, because they know that they can't make law because they know that the only true law is the common law, that everything else is simply statutory.
But what about the devil's lettuce? If you smoke that.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, still the same thing applies, but there's something else to this too. If I write a piece of legislation that says nobody can wear pink, and I get this enacted, I get the 51% of the peers to agree with it, I just now created a whole new class of criminal out of everybody that likes the color pink and likes to wear pink. Think about that. I just created a whole new class of criminal, and their only crime is that they like the color pink. Come the fuck on.
Now think
Pink
about
Panther,
it.
man.
Now think about it. Everyone in this group, what is pink? Can you define it? Can you explain it?
Well, there you go.
You can show a bunch of crayons that you think are pink, but do you know it's pink?
Well, there you go.
I've led to believe there could be 50 shades.
There you go. 50 shades of pink, 50 shades of gray. And who's to say, what if I see pink, but I see green? I mean, if I'm looking at something that's actually pink, but because of maybe I have color blindness or something,
I see green.
So now
Who's to tell me I'm wrong?
can they actually charge you with a crime for wearing pink if you are colorblind and you don't see pink?
Well, there you go. Because I'm led to believe impossibilities are not required by the law.
The devil's lettuce? It's not the devil's lettuce. They call it marijuana, but does any single one of them actually know what marijuana is? They didn't create it.
Even the word cannabis is still just somebody's opinion about a plant that they discovered somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And even the word hemp, it's still just somebody's opinion. They decided to call this one hemp for whatever reason.
The only thing you know, and even that is an opinion to a degree, is what does the Bible say about plants? That it's there for your use and benefit. Go back to that. That's all you can truly say you know. And even
Genesis
that
1:29, I believe it is.
Yeah, and that is still your opinion because you were not there when God created it. So you don't even know that it's actually marijuana.
Nope. And nor can anybody prove that it is. And again, like I was saying earlier, just because you have a large group of people or you just even one, it doesn't matter numbers. Just because somebody's believing in something doesn't necessarily make it true. And this is with a little caveat that truth and fact are really nothing more than what any two or more people agree upon. But even if they're wrong, it still doesn't make it right.
Well,
Are you going to have something that's really confusing? Think about that for a minute.
even when it comes to money, the same thing. It is nothing more than a piece of paper or an item that two people agree has the agreed upon value. Does that make it money? No. You just agree that it has that value and that it's money for you.
Well, that's why they talk about in contracts the quid pro quo, or the this or that, and sufficient consideration. Sufficient consideration is something that has some sort of value. And again, this is part of why I talk about the peppercorn, because this has been talked about in court cases, because the peppercorn has value. And you can literally trade one little peppercorn for damn near anything, provided that the other real party in interest is agreeable to it. So, like I said
peppercorn
before,
is considered lawful consideration. It's valued at 1 cent.
If I want to trade my house for a peppercorn because I got a steak on the barbie and that peppercorn would make the steak real yummy, I can do so. And there's nobody that can tell me otherwise. In fact, you're even legal to set your so-called house on fire if you want, as long as you're not doing it for insurance reasons. Now, of course, if you live in town, there would be probably so-called ordinances against that for setting a fire and running the risk of the entire neighborhood being burnt down. But the reality is, though, that something that is your so-called property, you can do whatever you want with it, and you can value it in whatever you want.
Language will always be ambiguous. What is actual language? It is a verbal sound that you are making, and depending on the culture and depending on the location, will have this is why I tell people that sit there and scream they want their common law, and I tell them, no, you don't. Common law is fluid. It always has been, always will be, because why? What is common in California is not common in Texas. What is common in the United States is definitely not the common law in Saudi Arabia. So when you say you want common law, you really need to think about what is the common law.
Well, of course, here in the United States, like I was saying earlier, common law is really nothing more than just one man's opinion, the so-called court, the judge sitting on the freaking bench. And the reality of that, like I mentioned with the earlier conversation with the professor, how the professor talks about the common law being the judges, the courts, and you can't get 3 judges to agree that they're drinking coffee from the coffee machine. That's the problem with it. Even the so-called common law is completely ambiguous because similar situations in 3 different guys, you come out with 3 different solutions or opinions. This goes right back to the old proverbial thing of you give one soup recipe to 12 different chefs and you come up with 12 different soups because everybody has their own twist on how they're going to deal with everything. Everything. And that includes judges. Even if they have their so-called rules, they're still going to work within those rules to put their own spin on whatever. So, yeah. This is part of why, too, it's so important to ask questions. Ask, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by this? Play in that ambiguous zone. When they ask you something about whatever, start talking about something else.
That's what
Because
Corey Zolman
obviously
did. They asked him, what is your name? He said, oh, yeah, I had a 1965 Chevelle at one time. And the judge looked at him funny and said, do what? Well, Your Honor, we can't have a meeting of the minds because we have no true definition of the words. And from their mouth to my ears, that's what I heard.
Yeah. And, of course, this goes right back to him trying to get definition put on the record. And since they didn't want to put any definitions on the record, that pretty much blew it all up. And he played that ambiguous game like the master. Like an absolute master from what I can tell.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what the best thing that anybody could do, because what he was ultimately doing was not only keeping himself out of making any so-called claims that they could hold against him that he would have to prove, but he was keeping proof on them.
Yeah.
Everything, including the words that they were using. And they didn't want the proof of the words that they were using because they didn't want to be bound by those words. So they fucked themselves. That's ultimately the thing that you end up doing when you're asking the right questions is it's not you hanging them. It's them hanging themselves by the answers that they give. The words that come out of their mouths are what's going to hang them. And them being IRS agents, judges, DAs, whoever, cops, whatever.
Now, I don't remember the source, but I was talking to a guy, and I want to say, but don't quote me on it, I want to say he was talking about his case. He did that in his case. He asked a lot of questions. He learned how to reply the right way. He never made claims. You know, he would say, like Popeye said, I'm led to believe this. That's not a claim, that's a belief. And the First Amendment, you're protected on your beliefs, right? And the judge in his case told him, this man is pure of heart. He is free to go.
And ultimately, I believe that this is the thing that is really the goal in all of this, because like I said, the judges do seem to be gatekeepers and everything is a test. And once you prove to the judges that you know who you are as a player in the game, then you pass the gate. And it seems to me, and I can't prove in any way, shape, or form by any documentation or anything because I don't have it. It's just anecdotal, completely anecdotal. But the reality is, ever since doing what I've done, it would seem that somehow, some way, the status has changed. I get treated differently by cops and or others. Even the judge, when I had to deal with another little legal issue after the so-called legal issues are done, I had to go back into the court during the Rona year. So it was actually a telephonic hearing where I had a telephonic hearing with the last judge where I said what I did about the name, that I led to believe I would be trespassing, committing fraud, all that shit. And when he asked if I was the legal name, I said, that's the name that I'm known to use. And he just moved right on. He didn't touch that. when asked what the so-called birth is, and I said, well, allegedly it's such and such. And he said, well, what do you mean by allegedly? I said, well, would it help if I told you that's the numbers on the so-called birth certificate? And he said, yeah, that would be fine. And after that, been several times where out on the road, I've tried to get pulled over by cops. I have not been pulled over. There was a situation a while back where I had foot surgery and I went to the doctor, and for some reason, big old tough me, I passed out when they were pulling the staples out of the foot. And when they were checking the heart and everything, they discovered that I had a shoulder holster on with the Glock 29 in it. And they even called the so-called fire department. The cops got called. They saw the so-called passport, called in the number and all that. Cops were standing right there. They never once talked to me about the gun. They never approached me. They didn't touch me. They didn't say anything other than one cop looked at me and nodded, hey, as if to, be a nice fella. And I nodded back, hey. That was it. I have not been able to get pulled over, even when I was doing 100 miles an hour down the freeway, and highway patrol pulled up on me, flashing lights. I backed down to 85. He drove away. Driven past cops while they're sitting in the traffic and drove by in the so-called diamond lane by themselves, waved at him even. No tickets. So I don't have any actual proof that the status has changed. But things that I've done in the past would have normally gotten me a ticket, gotten me pulled over, whatever. They leave me alone now. They don't touch me.
Can you share once again what it is that you're saying is the change that you did?
Well, there's two things. And one of the things that I did was I got the so-called state national passport. One of the few things that I do recommend if anybody's going to do anything, get that. Because the reactions that I've had whenever I presented that to anybody in so-called law enforcement has been exceptionally odd and bizarre. Like the first time I actually presented it was when I was on so-called probation. And the so-called probation officer handed it to the sheriff's deputy that was escorting us, allegedly. And she called in the number. And when whoever was on the other end got done speaking, she looked at me with a very odd look in her face, like, what the fuck? She called the probation officer over and said something to him about, listen to this, and told the people on the other end to repeat what they just said. And she turned the speaker down so where only they could hear it. And as soon as that guy, whoever it was done, I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could hear the noise coming out of the speaker. And when there was no more noise, they both looked at me, her again, and the probation officer with a look of, what the fuck? Right then, the probation officer grabbed the so-called passport away from her, walked over, and handed it to me and said, nice separation from the name and the driver's license. And he said, then I suggest you get a driver's license. And I asked him, am I obligated to do such a thing? And he said, no, and turned around and walked away. So, like I said, I don't have any actual paper type proof or anything. It's all anecdotal, but I have been treated differently since doing certain things. And is it one thing or the other or a combination of any? I have no idea. Can't say for sure. I can just tell you what I have done and how I'm treated now.
Does it look like
it's really interesting when I go into civil court to see how the judge treats me there, because one of the things that I'm putting in as an exhibit is the so-called passport. And part of the reason being because I'm doing that as an effort to somewhat prove the so-called status, only because I'm submitting also living trust that the mom had in place that named me as a so-called beneficiary, thus giving me the whole legal reason for attempting what I'm doing with these so-called mortgage companies. So that judge will obviously then look the name up or look the number up, and he'll probably see exactly the same thing as cops see.
Did you say that's one of two things?
Well, I don't do anything else. That's the only thing that I would do. I do keep the so-called driver's license, like I said earlier, because the wife wants me to keep insurance on the car and the house. So I do that for that reason, just to keep peace in the house. But realistically, she was actually one that originally did this before I had a chance. When the so-called driver's license expired, she just went ahead and got a so-called state citizen passport, or not state citizen passport, but the so-called state ID instead of the so-called driver's license. So she only has the driver's license. She had to go ahead and get it so that she could do the insurance like she wanted me to do. But yet, if she has to present anything with the so-called street address or anything like that, something like they have to scan, she only presents the so-called state ID. She never presents the driver's license. That's only for the so-called insurance, to get the insurance. Outside of that, that's sitting in a drawer somewhere, and she carries the state ID and the passport. I only carry the passport. I don't even keep the so-called driver's license anywhere near me. I only take it when I know that I might have to use it for an address, such as if I go on a trip and I'm going to rent a hotel room or something. Outside of that, I don't carry the driver's license at all.
Oh, very nice. So you got a tiny acknowledgement from that officer with the birth certificate.
Well, it's a passport, actually.
Oh,
passport.
Okay.
Yeah, with the passport, because they treated me totally oddly. I mean, they seriously looked at me like, "What the hell? What? Huh?" Yeah. And what was even more odd is that so-called probation officer handed me off to somebody else who didn't want to have anything to do with me after that. I thought that was really strange. It was kind of like you hot potatoed me to somebody else, and somebody further up the chain, the so-called superior officer. And I had a good time with him. In fact, I had two little situations that were pretty interesting with him, but one of the funniest ones is when he tried to get me to admit to first pay, knowing what pay is, and or admitting to paying anything, what money is, anything like that. Spent probably close to 30 minutes trying to get me to admit it, asking all these questions, and finally asked me. So, in fact, it was very interesting what he ended up doing in this, because it's literally sounded like he may have been listening to conversations that I've had, like in calls or something, because he started using words that I had actually used. Because he asked me, so let's just say that you're driving a car down the street and it starts to run out of gas. So I asked him, well, first of all, what do you mean by drive? What do you mean by car? What do you mean by gas? And he says, so let me put it this way. You're navigating a mechanical conveyance down strips of asphalt. And those are the exact words that I've used in conversations. And I'm like, oh, holy smoke. And he said, and it's out of that stuff that makes it go. And it's like, oh, shit. Okay, game on. So I told him I go to the place where you get the stuff that makes it go. He said, okay, well, what did you do when you got there? And I said, well, I put the hose thing in the side of the mechanical conveyance. And he said, well, what did you do before you put the hose in there? And I said, I picked the hose up. He said, well, what did you do before you picked the hose up? And I said, I walked to the hose. He said, well, what did you do before that? I said, well, I got out of the car, or I got out of the mechanical conveyance. He kept trying to get me to admit to putting a card in something or handing something known as cash over to somebody. I wouldn't do it. And after a couple minutes of this, and he was searching hard, trying to get me to admit to pay. So I decided to throw him a little curveball because it's like the conversation was going stale. And I asked the brother, I said, let me ask you this. If I'm to do this thing called pay that you're talking about, would I have to own something to be able to pay something? So he asked me, you don't own anything? So I asked him, well, is there any evidence that I do? Well, instead of providing any evidence or saying anything about, well, this, that, and the other thing, well, you don't have a vehicle registered in the name. He didn't go there. He didn't go there. No. He avoided that part and started to go down a line of questioning, trying to get me to admit to knowing what pay is, or ownership is, rather. And he finally gets down to, he asked me, well, let me ask you this. Who owns the clothes on your back? I looked this brother square in the eye, and I said, I'm led to believe God. He went silent for a cool 10 seconds. I know, because I have this conversation on recording. He went silent. And when he picked up the conversation, he left the conversation of ownership and pay. He would never pick it up, no matter how much I had tried to pick it up afterwards in subsequent meetings and such and conversations. I'd mention cash, I'd mention money, I'd mention ownership, I'd do all these things. He would never touch that conversation again.
And then you got a letter that said what?
This debt had been discharged. Yeah. And that's after I had conversation with the so-called financial officer, where I got them to admit that it was contracts. And once they said it was a contract for a third time, I asked them, okay, great. Then where's my real party and interest? And instead of answering that question, they tried to get me to answer, well, how are you going to pay? And I said, what do you mean by pay? Well, do you have cash? What do you mean by cash? Well, do you have a check? What do you mean by a check? Well, can you do a credit card? What do you mean by a credit card? Well, what about a debit card? What do you mean by a debit card? Could you get a money order? What do you mean by a money order? They would never define any of these things. They would just move on to a different whatever and ask me if I could do that, whatever do that is. This is that word game thing that they try to play. That's all that ambiguous shit that if you don't ask the right questions, you just sit there and agree to it or whatever, because even silence at this point is pretty much agreement. This is how you keep the burden of proof from them. And they can't prove shit. And they can't define shit either. They couldn't define any of it.
That's where in the law of agency class that I teach, okay, in the section of ratification of, under the doctrine of ratification, you'd be blown away how many times it talks about silence or acquiescence.
Yep. Silence is consent. Silence is them being able to make the answer whatever they want. And that's the last thing you want to do. But of course, you don't want to necessarily answer them directly. And everything that anybody has ever says to you, you want to pick out the most important thing that they've said and ask them, what do they mean by that? There might be a couple of other questions in there, but you always want to revert it back to who's claiming that. One of the things that has made Boris as successful as he is his asking for proof of claim. Well, this is the same thing as asking for the claim, because the only person that can actually have the proof of claim is the claimant. Think about it. And there can't be a claim without a claim. And this is the thing that I was wanting to kind of press with Cite Your Authority is, even like Preacher was saying earlier, they can say the United States, but okay, great. When can I meet the United States? And this gets down into the reality of what you were talking about too, Morgan, with if you're going to go after a judge, you have to be sure and absolutely certain that whatever is happening at that point is something that you did not consent to. Kind of like when I asked the judge if he was putting up surety for his claim, because at that point he knew that I wasn't consenting. He knew damn good and well that I wasn't consenting. And he also knew at that point that he wasn't messing with your average everyday Joe Schmuck, which is part of the reason why he ran, because he was smart to realize that I wouldn't sue him as a judge. I would sue him as Joe Schmuck, the ragman, acting as judge, but I wouldn't even put that part in any so-called paperwork I might file to file suit. I would sue him as Joe Schmuck, the real man, because what's going to have to happen is he's going to have to claim that he was representing the state, which is exactly what you want, because he's going to attempt to put the corporate veil back up in between you two as protection from you. Well, now that he's claimed that he's representing the state, it's his burden to prove that the state actually exists beyond a piece of paper with ink on it, beyond the imagination, which means that he actually needs to get a piece of paper with ink on it to step up onto the witness stand and give firsthand testimony. And he's not going to be able to do it. It's not going to happen. And even if there's a judge sitting on the bench overseeing all this and might be leaning in favor of the judge, all that has to happen is that judge needs to make one little tiny claim. And you simply ask the judge, are you sure you want to be making any claims that you have to put surety up for? Or like cite your authority said earlier, could you please tell me who's putting up surety for this claim? There's several different ways to ask the same question, because asking who's the claimant is the same thing as asking who is the person with first-hand knowledge, is the same thing as asking who is my real guardian interest. It's all the same thing. It's all asking for the very same person, because
is the secured.
What's that?
Is the secured party in interest available to potentially provide surety to the claim?
Well, not a secured party in interest, a real party in interest.
Oh, that makes more sense. Wait,
it's a real party in interest because like I've talked about, in order for there to be a true contract, an actual valid contract, this is aside from the legal maxim that says he who will be deceived, let him, which I'll cover in a minute. But in order for there to be a true valid contract, the way it is taught in law school is there must be a meeting of the minds. In other words, two or more people have to actually have a verbal conversation to agree on this, that, and the other.
So it cannot be secured because there is no available representative for the U.S. corporation.
Well, it's not it. It's not a matter of an available representative because there's lots of those. What do you think the judge and the DAs and the cops are? Those are all available representatives. Problem is those are all meddling interlopers in the essence of, if you're going to have a contract, you need to be dealing with the real party in interest. If you're not, if you don't actually have a conversation with that other man or woman or other parties thereof, you're never going to have an actual true meeting of the minds, because you are not the one who is actually asking, what do you mean by this word? And that other man or woman answering, this is what I mean by this word. Them asking you, what do you mean by this word? And you answering, this is what I mean by this word. And that becomes memorialized in the writing so that it's those definitions and terms are clearly defined, so that there is no ambiguity as to just this one word, and nobody knows for sure what's just that one word if they're to read the contract, if things go bad, such as a judge. It has to be clearly defined.
That makes much more sense. Okay. Sorry for my mistake.
No worries. But this is the reality of it, because in order to come to formation, which is the actual contract, you have to have this meeting of the minds. You have to have these conversations. Now, for he who will be deceived, let him comes in. If somebody is just signing a so-called contract, and they can even ask the agent in front of them on the other side of the desk or whatever, counter, if you're in a cell phone store or whatever, it doesn't matter. those people do not know what the definition of words in this contract on this piece of paper with ink on it actually mean. They might think they know, but they're not the authors. This is why we're talking about the authors of legislation and such things, because whoever it is that wrote the words is the only one that has the definition of the words in their head. Everybody else is just interpreting or guessing as to what those words mean. Now, they might be guessing on the general context of what the word means. That's great. But again, if I said the word gray and I didn't define the darkest shade of gray, but that's what I meant, you're all screwed if you didn't think of the darkest shade of gray. So that being said, this is part of why anything that's just already been pre-written and set for you technically is not a valid contract, because number one, they're going to say that this is a contract from this so-called corporation, whatever the corporation may be. And it could be a creditor of one nature or another, or whatever. But the reality is, and judges know this shit, they know this specifically, that a piece of paper with ink on it comes under the category of not of legal capacity. The same as anybody that is mentally ill is not of legal capacity, because they don't have the ability to have this conversation. What do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? They're mentally ill. Plus, if they're mentally ill, they may not even be able to physically perform the task because they may not even understand the task. The same thing applies to children under the age of majority, especially infants. They're not of legal capacity. They don't have the ability to understand certain things, and they may not even have the physicality to perform any tasks. Well, a piece of paper comes up with that category because you can't have the conversation with a piece of paper with or without ink. If you ask anybody any time, have you heard a piece of paper speak as we are speaking to each other now? I guarantee you nobody has ever said yes when I've asked that question. They say, well, the on the piece of paper say things. I said, do they say things or do you read it? Because if it's saying something, could you ask it to speak up? I can't hear it. This is the reality of things. This isn't going down to, again, your most basic logic, what I'm led to believe is known as the first principles of reasoning. You break things down to the most tangible baseline element. And then you only build back with concrete elements, real, factual, solid evidence. Everything else is just hearsay and illusion. This is part of why I have the fun with it that I do, because this is the place where once you start to understand this stuff at the level that I do, at least I believe that I do, and of course I've had success with it, so I'm heading in the right direction, and I keep working at honing and refining. It becomes rather fun. You realize that pendulum swings in all directions, but the better you get at certain things, the more you can get it swinging in your direction and consistently swinging in your direction. And doing what I do is not a defensive thing, but it can also be offensive. You can actually acquire things with simply asking some of the right questions. And I have done so. In fact, one of the funnier little stories is when the doctors actually wanted me to have a colonoscopy, and I didn't want to have that. And I had seen the so-called Cologuard test advertised on TV, which is essentially a stool test. So I asked if I could just do that. And the doctor said, yeah, sure. He told me that they could do it down at Quest too, but they put it in for the Cologuard test, no problem. So they put it in the request. The insurance said no. But then Cologuard actually contacted me and said, we knew that you were putting in a request for your insurance to cover it, and we're sorry that they wouldn't cover it, but we do actually have some different things that might be able to assist, including financial assistance. And I said, well, that would really be the biggest help because I don't have much of that stuff called Federal Reserve notes. And so the girl said, all right, well, we'll send you the forms to fill out. And they did. I filled them out. And in the part where it asked about employment, I didn't have a so-called job. I was in school full time at that time, pre-law. And so I put not available or NA, and I sent it all back. And a week or so later, they sent me a letter saying that they had denied the financial assistance because I didn't put any employer information. So I called them up and asked who's making the claim that I need to have employer information when I don't actually have an employer. Well, nobody would step up. I asked them to have whoever it was that had the first-hand knowledge of this, whoever's making the claim. Here's the phone number I'm known to use. Please have them call. I talked to some girl the first time. Called back about a week later. I talked to some other guy. Gave him the same basic thing. Asked him who's making the claim, so on. He didn't really know. So I asked him, I said, here's the phone number again. To be sure you have it. He said, the computer. I said, please have whoever it is give me a call. If I don't hear anybody or from somebody, I'll call back in a week. This is on a Wednesday, so the next Wednesday I called, get a different guy. And at this point, I was tired of making phone calls to them. So instead of asking who was making the claim, when the guy made a claim that he didn't know who really that was, and so I asked him, well, are you putting up surety for that claim? He said, well, actually, there's a committee that makes these decisions. And I said, well, when can I talk to the committee? And he said, the committee doesn't talk to anybody. And I said, well, are you putting up surety for that claim? And he said, well, I don't know what to tell you about that. And I said, well, how about this? Here's the phone number. Please have the committee call me. It's imperative that I must speak with them. And like I said, the entire time I already knew that I could go to Quest right down the street and get it all done because they do the stool sample test too. So it had nothing to do with that. It became a principal thing when they denied me because of not having employer information when I didn't have a so-called employer. So when I hung up with this guy, the third call on that Wednesday, that very next Saturday, the Cologuard test ended up showing up on the front first step. That was simple, nothing. It was penny. It was nothing example of how to be offensive with it as opposed to defensive. But it's the example that is the most poignant because it was so nothing and it was only about the principle, the whole reason I did it. Wasn't all overly necessary. All right. Round of bong hits for everybody. Who wants a bong hit? No pushing and shoving to the front of the line. Y'all good? Yeah.
You really got to be dominant. Let them know you ain't playing around. Because most people, they tend to think people are serious or just, oh, I can just brush this guy off. Nah. I don't take that type of disrespect.
Well, it comes down to this. Just like with this morning when I had a so-called phone call from somebody claiming that there is something owed. In fact, they were calling so-called wife all over. played along as if I was her, utilizing the name that she's known to use, and went right into it. Started asking who has the first-hand knowledge. And inevitably, these people always do, and they always get indignant along the way. And I won't let them push me around. I won't just go quiet. I'll get up in their face. And this is some of the warrior that was instilled in me from starting at age 4. There's still warrior in me. I walk the path of what I'm led to believe is the meek, which somebody that's willing to keep the sword put in the sheath until the very absolute last resort. I don't necessarily pull the sheath from the sheath on these people, but I will get a little assertive with them, if you will. Like when they start to interrupt me, and I'll speak over the top of them and say something to the effect of, "Oh, I'm so sorry, the middle of my sentence interrupted the beginning of yours. Please go ahead." Or I even ask them, "Hey, wait a minute. Is it your policy? Is it your company policy to interrupt somebody when they're talking?" Yeah, I don't play. I'm very strong with these people, but I also will play a bit so-called country dumb, in the essence that, don't really know exactly what it is that they mean by certain things. Like when they're asking me to verify the so-called name, and I tell them, "Well, that's the name I'm known to use," and they say something to the effect of, "Well, I need a firm yes." "Well, what do you mean by a firm yes?" "Well, I need a firm yes." I said, "Okay, I heard you say that, but what do you mean by a firm yes? Are you asking me if I am a name? Or are you asking me if I own the name? What is it exactly that you're asking me here?" I'm led to believe that I use the name. I'm led to believe that I've already given you first-hand testimony to that effect, that I am known to use the name. How can I help you? They get too sticky on it, I turn the tables on them. I say, "Well, let's do this. How about you verify who you claim to be?" "Well, I'm such and such from some company." "Great. That's wonderful. You said that earlier, but how is that verifying who you are? Is that a home phone number? Is that a home address? I need to know who you are. I'm led to believe that there's many scams out there, and you wouldn't want me to be scammed now, would you?" They always answer, "Oh, no. Oh, okay, well, then go ahead and verify who you are." "Well, my employee number is such and such." "Well, then how's that verifying when you call back? Okay, again, how is that verifying? You could have it all set up. I'm led to believe that there's scams out there that have all this shit figured out.
I've done
So
that
how
same
is that
thing
helping me out?
I've done that same thing with third-party debt collectors. I also tell them, say, "Yes, I'm the agent for that estate." That really throws them for a loop. They're like,
Yeah, they don't know what to do with that one either.
"Well, we don't have anything on file." I said, "Well, I thought you knew who you was calling. You called me."
Right? Oh, and they can never answer that one either. It's like, don't you know who it is that you're looking for?
I said, "Well, we're trying to talk to this person." I said, "Well, that's an estate." "Well, I don't understand." I said, "Well, let me explain it this way. John Doe Debt Collector is a company, right?" I said, "Can John Doe Debt Collector actually speak?" They said, "Well, no, it has to have an agent, which would be me." I said, "That's correct." I said, "It can't speak. You have to speak for it as the agent. I'm the agent for that estate. How are you going to speak to an estate?" And they eventually just hang up. They can't handle it.
Well, that was like with the guy this morning. He said that it was some company that had provided them the information. I asked, "Well, did you actually talk to the company?" He said, "No, you can't talk to the company." I said, "Well, then how did it tell you such and such?" He didn't know how to deal with that. He just went silent for a minute because they get stumped by this shit. And the reality is, too, just like with the one that I just posted the other day, a lot of times these people start to get indignant, too. They start to get mad at you because you're not buying into the illusions.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do that.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you go and list that one, King, she even says something effective. You know, I'm questioning legal documents. I'm like, yeah. Yeah. I said something effective. You know, are you expecting me to just believe anything that's coming out of your meddling, interloping mouth? So that's the big thing. When you actually approach it from this specific direction, most people on the other end, they have no clue because they're all bought up into, because this whole system and all of us, including myself, we're raised on hearsay and assumptions driven by linguistic sleight of hand. We're handed toys and said, here, this is your toy. We're never taught contracts or anything else. We're told we're a so-called U.S. citizen, but we're never shown any evidence of such thing. We're never shown what the true actual definition of a citizen is. We're never told that the reality that a citizen can never even exist. It's all hearsay and assumptions driven by linguistic sleight of hand. We're all bought into this huge-ass illusion. Each and every one of us were raised this way, except for somebody that might have had a parent like me when they were, when they were born, and or somewhere along the way, the parents started to learn and started to raise the child and such. I know that the grandchildren will be, because both the daughters now know who they are as players in the game. Nobody will ever get past them anymore, ever.
James, you don't have to worry about interrupting and changing the discussion. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, if you got something to talk about, you can.
Well, this is my first time. I didn't know if you guys had a study group going or whatever, but I didn't want to interrupt anybody. But I heard you on, I think it was King L Bay TikTok the other night. Man, I learned a lot from you every time I listen to you. But it seemed like every time a person gets into this, gets into the studying, something has caused them to do it, and usually it's not a good thing because they're getting railroaded. And I've just been through kind of hell.
It feels like you're getting railroaded, but you're really not. It's just you don't understand the rules to the game, and that's why it feels that way.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah, I totally agree. But I started listening to David Straight first, went to one of his meetings down there, and Jesus, I come out of that place thinking, there is no way. Just everything's at a cost. Everything's at a price. Man, most people in this world don't have, $10,000 put in something to, they just don't have it. When you ask them about something, they don't want that thing.
Why do you think?
Go ahead.
I've got my structure the way it is. Do I have classes that people pay for? Yeah. They're not expensive. It's $125 a month for a membership. That's just to cover my time to park my truck and devote my time to you. But that being said, you don't have to take a single class. There's information in this group in the file section. You just got to work to learn it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, and I have been. I've been studying for about a year, but I was crippled in that accident where, I was in a wheelchair for 6 months, couldn't work. And before I started studying, I'd filed for disability, and then, got in studying more and found out, man, maybe I shouldn't have done this. And either way, I went ahead and filed my taxes because, I'd done most of my studying on the IRS and Publication 1212, studied a lot of Gene Keating stuff. And I broke that down and just understood. So I still was skeptical about some things and about whether this could really happen. So I went to my bank and I said, hey, look, I got some questions. Don't think I'm dumb, but are you taking my assets? If I give you $1,000, are you sending it to the Federal Reserve and getting 10,000 Federal Reserve notes back? And she's like, well, we don't get that much. I said, well, I understand because you got to pay the taxes on it. I said, but still, you're getting like 6,700, 6,500 back, and you're only giving me 10% of that, and it's devalued currency. I gave you gold, and you're giving me paper to wipe my tail with.
Well,
and I said,
James, your deposit is actually you're giving them credit. You're giving them credit.
Right.
You're the actual.
I'm giving you a loan, right? I mean, it's not like a loan, right? I mean, because if I'm borrowing money from a
I was just going to say that's part of why the whole secured party creditor stuff, to a little bit, does
hold on, Papa. James,
are the
you
money.
need to fix your computer so we don't get the feedback. Your volume's up, so your microphone is picking up the speakers.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Is that better?
A little bit.
We'll see. Get it a little bit.
Okay.
So that's part of the secured party creditor thing does have a bit of validity, because technically speaking, it's every man and woman that is actually the money. It's our energy that creates everything. Nothing can be done without man's input. Nothing. That's why the so-called promissory note, it's a bunch of words on paper and ink, and it becomes something of value only when somebody puts a so-called signature on it. That's when it becomes value, and that's why when the banks are doing this, because that is the only thing of value, they can't lend out their own money, and they are technically not supposed to actually even be lending out the customer's money, the depositor's money, even though they have this whole fractional reserve thing in everybody's mind and yada yada. That's one fraud for them to say, oh, look over here, folks, so you don't see the real fraud. I'm actually stealing your money when you sign the promissory note.
Exactly. I mean, just like with a mortgage.
Interest in the funds that are gained upon those securitization of your credit, your note.
Well,
it's registered to your account.
Technically speaking, yeah.
Well,
I mean,
it's not your account. You know why it's not your account?
Well,
no, you're just a member of the account.
We're representing it.
You put it in the name of the trust using the all caps name and the social. That makes it property of the trust.
Yeah.
Yes, but it does
There's
not mean that
nothing
it
that's
can be
actually yours.
subjected to abuse unless you're negligent and if you want to protect it.
Well, see, this is the one thing too. There's nothing to really protect. See, that's just it. People, in fact, one of the things that I believe is out there is something called LifeLock and a couple of other things that are allegedly protect your so-called identity. Well, the reality is it's not your identity. Everything connected to that so-called legal name belongs to whoever actually owns the legal name. This is what I was saying earlier. It all belongs to somebody called Social Security Administration. They own it. Nobody else. They do. So
I don't necessarily agree with you on the protection part. Yes, it is a trust. Yes, the trustees are the legal owner. They did give it to you to use in commerce, but how can they balance the books for that account if you're not doing your duty so they can actually set off the debt?
No, I agree with that. The thing I'm talking about, and especially in the essence of if the so-called name is stolen. It's been my experience because I've had this happen. Nothing changes. every so-called bank and so-called card that you have, whatever. All you have to do is call up. They negate whatever charges. Nothing comes back at you. They issue you cards and just continue on. That's all that ever happens. And the reality of it comes down to the most basic logic is because of the fact that that name doesn't belong to you. If somebody has stolen it, they should be the ones that are really worried about it if it actually has been stolen.
And look at all the people.
Alongside setting off the taxes balancing the book is actually the corporations then owe tax on the
Correct.
profiteering that they've done.
Correct, but see,
Which benefits the United States.
That's just like these IRS groups, W4 and all this stuff. What do they keep putting out? Oh, you should go to the IRS and declare it identity theft. No. If you had all your original paperwork when they gave you the social, they tell you to go to the FTC for identity theft. So they will tell you
What's the
how to do
FTC?
everything. That's the Federal Trade Commission.
Okay. All right.
See, they will tell
All
you
I know is that
everything if we would just take the time to read it.
Okay, I'm going to do that. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've been waiting ever since January. I mean, they won't say that I've done anything frivolous. I mean, which I sent you a message about calling Tommy Tuberville's office and saying, hey, man, I'm in trouble. I need some help. And, oh, man, they were, oh, yeah, we can help you. And so they got me a tax advocate. So I'm recording the conversation with the tax advocate. I record every conversation with them. And they all go through it with me. Oh, it looks fine to me. And then the tax advocate, I ask her, look, you want us to pay our taxes. We're paying taxes on capital gains from my mortgage, from all my bills, people that are using my credit. Okay? The banks are using my deposits and checks and everything else that I have. They're using those, they're debt instruments, and they owe the tax on it. So all I'm doing is turning in the tax that I'm supposed to. That's what I'm supposed to do. Okay. I filed an 8281 showing who's using them. And then this lady comes back, what's an OID? And I said, you got to be kidding me. You don't know what an original issue discount is? So I've never even heard of it. Yet she can go to Tommy Tuberville's office and say that I'm doing something frivolous, whenever she's never even read Publication 1212. These are the people that's running that show.
But you are doing something wrong.
It's ridiculous.
Are you?
Yeah, like I'm doing something wrong, and I'm doing exactly what the law of the IRS says, which they're just,
James,
I told her, I said, look, you're.
Hold on, James. You're issuing
Yes, sir.
no ID, and they're telling you something. Because why? You were not the original issuer.
Right. But they won't give it to me.
Because you were not the one supposed to be doing the OID. They don't have
I understand that.
It's not your name, and it's not your trust.
Okay.
That name is property of the United States. The trustees are listed on the Social Security website. I've shown this. The trustees are the owner.
Okay.
And if you own a business, so you understand a basic principle of what a registered agent is.
Right.
Okay? You're the registered agent for that trust. So what is your duty as the registered agent?
I'm supposed to
forward everything to the principal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What are you not doing?
Brought up somebody. Wait.
I'm not forwarding it to the right people, evidently.
Evidently, yeah. Everybody keeps going to the third parties. The IRS is a third party.
like you got to think.
Okay.
But anyhow, somebody once told me that there are. So, for example, every contract that you enter into, for example, that may be with an insurance company, or you open up an account with a bank that you forgot about long ago. And these things that of that nature is that you can actually request the contracts. Not all, like, we have millions of contracts, right? The contracts that you've entered into, given permission, somewhat like a power of attorney to certain agencies, you can actually contact the IRS to get that list and then go individually revoke those contracts or rescind them from those agencies to cut off those ties to better protect the person.
Evidence of this, King?
Somebody told me, and I do believe it, and there
Yeah.
are IRS forms that substantiate
King,
such claims that have backing.
King, this is what I tell you. You talk like you know when you're regurgitating what people tell you.
Yeah, but there's
Guess
an IRS
what?
form. Why would there be an IRS form?
In the law, they don't have to give you the contract. If you lost your contract, too darn bad.
But money's free.
Hey, Pastor. So,
what?
So when I got an inquiry back from after I sent something to Treasury, and then they sent it down to Ogden, and Ogden sent me something.
Okay, Eric, your signal's bad, Eric. Try it again. While Eric's fixing his signal, Carl Lentz, if you know his story, the state of Alabama seized his kid. And this guy ain't no slouch. He's pretty freaking smart. And he went federal court and he asked them, show me the contract. And the other side said what? No. And the federal judge actually agreed with him and said, no, sorry, you lost the contract, Carl. I can't do nothing about it. They don't have to give it to you. Now, outside the court, the judge met with him and said, look, I can't help you. I can't do this because they're right. But here's what you need to start looking into, and pointed him in a direction. See, a lot of gurus say a lot of things, and King, you come in here and talk like you know, and all you're doing is regurgitating stuff that I keep shooting down. Why do you keep listening to these people?
Well, if the person's accounts are generated as by the signature through the agent, the individual who
but what are you signing?
Utilizes that.
You're signing
a security interest. You're creating a security, which you have, just like a driver's license. That's a bond.
King,
that's a security.
If you own a company, call it King Reflect LLC, you are going to sign the documents King Reflect LLC, and you're going to put the EIN on it that reflects the account number for that LLC. It's no different. You're not putting your name on it. You were putting the name of the trust. I've proven this to you, King, and you keep coming back thinking it's yours, talking like it's yours. Even though
but there wouldn't be so much fraudulent debt if
there is
people...
no fraudulent debt.
But you get what I'm saying with having...
No, I don't.
What I'm saying is that, okay, listen to what I have to say, okay? As I explained, remember that one time we were talking about how everything is monetized from you driving your cars and taking a shit to the internet service provider spying on every single individual within the country through their phones and the router and the internet and stuff like that? Well,
but everybody agrees to it.
Yeah, but I would also say, okay, I'm not looking at a greedy stance. I'm just saying if you want to protect the person, right, and you're able to revoke prior authorizations that you had given out to other agencies, companies, corporations, LLCs, whatever it may be, isn't that in the best interest of the United States and the trust?
That depends on what you think you're going to apply it to. What is the role of the registered agent? It is so freaking simple. It's in front of your face. You see it everywhere. And King, you keep ignoring it. The role of the registered agent is one simple thing: to receive service of process. And the second part is to forward all those services of processes called a notice, a demand, or a process, and forward it to the principal. How can the principal settle its debts if you are not telling them these debts exist?
Well, here's something else, King. You said something to the effect of best interest of the United States. Have you ever talked to the United States to find out what it thinks is its best interest?
Well, having random notes that are gaining interest that is generated out of thin air in the millions of dollars is not exactly the best interest of the United States, right?
Is it? Wait a minute.
I asked you a specific question. Did you speak with the United States so the United States can tell you what its best interest is? Yes or no?
The United States has not spoken to me.
Even if you speak to the Treasury.
So how are you going to know what the fuck is the best interest of the United States, bro? Why speak to say?
Well, I'd imagine not having billions of dollars in debt notes, accruing interest would be in the best interest of the United States.
Well, let me tell you this,
that's,
King.
That's your thought. That's your opinion.
That's your thought, yes. King, you listen to Robert Kiyosaki?
No, I haven't listened to him.
He's a billionaire. You know what he says about debt?
It's a product.
That's how he makes money, is through debt.
Mm-hmm.
You are thinking all this debt is not in the best interest, but the wealthy elite use debt to become rich.
Yep. So thinking that you know what's in the best interest of anybody is really, number one, very dangerous. Very dangerous. Regardless of any so-called evidence, if I put out a bunch of evidence that led you to believe one thing, and I did it on purpose, especially, now you're out there thinking, oh, this would be in Popeye's best interest, and the reality is, no, the complete opposite is actually in my best interest because I just have led you to do something else you think you know, but you have no clue.
Yes, but I'm talking about the notes. I'm talking about the notes that people are unwary or unaware of. I'm not talking about the particular loans or credit cards that are backed by human energy and commerce.
It's irrelevant what you think, King. How many times have I told you read their stuff and stop listening to gurus giving you crap information? You are making presumptions on that you know what you're talking about, and I keep telling you over and over, you don't know what you're talking about because you're listening to other teachers putting out bad information.
And like we were talking about earlier, you can read every code, statute, regulation, every piece of legislation, anything you can get your hands on. But unless you've actually spoken with the author of that, whatever, you can't possibly ask him what he means by any of those words. You're still going on the complete assumption that you know what these words mean.
Exactly.
You don't have a clue, bro. And this is one of the things that I actually do to help people realize this in a very realistic sense when people start thinking about, oh, I know this, I know that. Most people don't really know shit. And in a very large general sense, they don't know squat. Like we talked about, first and foremost, this entire world has been raised on hearsay and assumption, driven by linguistic sleight of hand. And I'm not shitting about that. It truly is. Most people have no evidence thus to confirm any of their beliefs. But let's just think about this in just a real world sense. Not even the imagination world of law and legal and government and all that. Take a baseball, put it on a table or a shelf, and get eye level with that ball. When you're sitting there without touching that ball, you can only see roughly about 25% of that ball. which means that you cannot see the entire thing. So that means that in a general sense, you don't know squat, you just simply have a minor perspective. Now, if you pick that ball up and you twist it around in your hands, 360 times 360, that can happen in a matter of a couple of seconds because the hand's pretty quick and you can twist that ball around pretty fast. Now you've seen all 129,600 different positions of that ball. You got a pretty clear view of the outside of the ball. But there's still the inside. And then there's just the entire ball as a unit itself. I don't personally know what kind of animal they get the leather from. I'm guessing it's probably cow, but I don't know for sure. I don't know specifically what material they use for the thread or the gauge of the thread, the size of that thread. I'm guessing it's probably cotton because that was the most prevalent thread in the day when they first started making baseballs. Again, I don't even know the size of that thread, the gauge of that thread. I don't know what that core is made of. I know from having taken balls apart when they were old and starting to get trashed that it's a cord that's wrapped up several times. I don't know how many wraps it takes. I don't know the gauge of that cord, and I don't know what that's made of. So in a basic sense, I know what a baseball is, and that it's something that is used in a game. But do I actually know the ball itself? I don't know sizes. I don't know materials. I don't know dimensions. Now, just take that basic, I don't know the materials and I don't know the dimensions, and look around the room that you're sitting in and look at how much you don't know. Take a look at outside and look at a so-called vehicle, mechanical conveyance, and realize how much you don't know when it comes to just simply dimensions and materials. And this is just one aspect. We're not even getting back into, again, the ambiguity and illusion of law and verbiage, because law is nothing more than words, and all ambiguous words that allegedly cast a spell, but it only casts a spell if he believes words. Does that all make sense?
And now here's something else, King. You come in here and you do it all the time. You spout information you've heard from everyone, other people. You very seldom, when it comes to legal stuff, and this is why I like Eric, cite your authority. You will share things that you're interested in, science, crypto, stuff like that. You never cite an authority where you're getting the legal information from because you're too busy thinking other people are experts when they're not. What is the one thing I do a lot in here? When I tell you this is what something says, this is what it means, one, I'm giving you my opinion based on my knowledge, but I share the source information.
That's where you and I are pretty much parallel in that the things that I will claim, because I do my best to avoid claims, but I will make some claims, and the claims that I do make and consistently are things that I can have somebody look up on the so-called net and can read through it together. And I can ask them, well, does it say what I believe it says? And whoever it is can either confirm or deny. And if I'm wrong, they can point out where I'm wrong. Of course, you never have, because I'm going to go exactly whatever it is that we're looking at says. So, yeah. And I rarely even would make any citations or claims citing something in a so-called courtroom I would believe is dangerous because, again, it's all opinions. There's always a counter. And especially when it comes to citing so-called court cases, it's one judge's opinion, and you're now asking another judge to have an opinion of an opinion. That's just ridiculously dangerous. Ridiculously dangerous. And if you don't happen to like that judge's opinion that's standing in front of you, all they have to do is say, because I said so, and now you're done. What are you going to do after that? Not a damn thing. Not a damn thing. Because you just blew your whole, oh, I got this case and it's going to make a judge decide that he has to go in my favor. Oh, no, he didn't go in my favor. Damn it. Ah! You blew your whole wad and you got nothing left. Gee, imagine this. Could it be that I've done that stuff and that's why I know how that works? Damn near explicitly, right down to what the judge will actually say to you. Because I've heard those words, because I've said so.
So what I was saying earlier, Pastor, I guess I was breaking up. I told you how I sent that one deal to the Treasury, and they sent it to Ogden, Utah.
Okay.
And when I get stuff from Ogden, Utah, it still says Department of Treasury at the top of the letterhead.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, you got offices all over.
I actually mailed something one time to this is when I did those forms back in 2018. It caused me to get that letter I've shown y'all about how it's not linked to you. Right? You know who signed the green card? It wasn't Fiscal Services. It was the Federal Reserve. So yes, it doesn't surprise me one bit when they sent it to Ogden, it was signed by the Treasury. They have different offices, and the IRS and the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, they're kind of holding hands with each other.
And not only they're holding hands, but they're doing the stuff essentially because of that, because they're all in the same boat together.
That's right. They're all in the same boat. But go on. If you heard what I said, Eric, go on with the rest. Because I saw you drop off.
Yeah, isn't the IRS a payment processing center for the Treasury?
I don't know that they're the payment processing. I see the IRS because what do? Accounting. They're the accounting firm for the Treasury. The Federal Reserve would be the bank holding company for the Treasury, and the Treasury is the people that direct the money and tell the IRS how to record it, so the books can balance. The IRS, I see them as the bookkeeping, because what do when they come and audit you? What are they doing? They're doing your bookkeeping. Did you do your bookkeeping right? See what I'm saying, Eric?
Yeah, I hear you.
Now, does that mean they don't have a branch that does that? No, I don't know that. There is a Treasury address for remittance coupons, and it goes to a branch of the IRS, but it says on the address in the name of the Treasury. We've shared that in this group. So there are different offices where the Treasury is involved under different things. There is a lot, I can tell you, I don't know. I do not know why there's 2 Federal Reserves in Minnesota, but there is. And I think there's a special reason why. I think this is why Fiscal Services is there. Minnesota is special. That's why you can do the assumed name certificate in Minnesota. You don't have to prove ownership. And the only thing that's my speculation is I think there is one branch. Do we know which one? No. That is strictly set aside for the people. The rest of the branches are all for the government.
Yeah. So there's 2 of everything. There's a de jure side and a de facto side.
Yep. And the people are not getting, and de jure and de facto, a lot of the groups out there, they think one is fake and one is real. No, they're both legitimate governments. They just both operate differently.
Well, that's kind of a word salad. You could say one's of fictions and one's of fact.
They're both a fiction because a government is a creation of man, and everything man creates is a legal fiction. That's why it's on paper. See, God's the only thing that can create real things like man, like birds, like grass. Man can only create fictions.
And man can only create from stuff that God has provided.
That's right.
There's a little story out there that says a guy having a conversation with God, tells God, I learned how to bake a pie. And the guy's like, oh, really? So, yeah, I can bake an apple pie. I can bake it from scratch. And he said, oh, yeah? Like, God says, asked him, so you can, like, grow the apples and everything else? And he's like, yeah, I can do the whole thing. The guy's like, okay, show me how. So this guy goes and grabs a shovel and starts to dig in the dirt. The guy says, oh, wait a minute, brother, get your own dirt.
That's right. That's a
people
good,
want to, again, this is,
that's a good
people want to wrap their mind around that
for
ownership
pride
shit.
right there.
Yep. Because people want to wrap their mind around ownership. And, you know, again, show me where you got a title deed with God's name on it, God's signature. I don't even know what God's signature looks like, so I wouldn't even know. Somebody could actually try to fake me out, and they might get away with it. But, you know, I would have a real hard time believing that I actually would see a title deed with
Why do you
something
think,
called God's signature on it.
yeah, why do you think in a lot of the insurance contracts and other types of contracts, they have a God clause, you know, because why? They don't have any control over the creator.
Yeah, and they call it acts of God.
Yeah.
If something happens, an act of God, and they'll use those words too. In fact, the word elements, such as elements of a cave, which they want you to believe now means structure, the different parts of the so-called case. But no, still means the same thing. And this is part of why it's important.
Wouldn't that be an awesome debate with an atheist that works for an insurance company? Because you don't believe in God, but your contract has a God clause.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Why? So that means you're in violation of your own beliefs.
Right. Well, in your older legal dictionaries, the word elements means acts of God. It's exactly what it means. They now have watered it down, want you to believe it's something else, and they've actually even changed the so-called definition portion of acts of God to the same as acts of God, because the true definition is acts of God or the same as acts of God. So now they only have that same as acts of God, citing some so-called case that defined only that part. Oh, no, it's still the whole damn thing. It's just a matter of, again, anything goes to question unrebutted or unobjected to. So if you don't question it, it stands as that's what it is.
They don't even have elements listed in Black's 11th. They have other words: all elements rule, common elements, elements of crime, essential elements test, extra elements test, legal elements test, same elements test. So they got rid of elements.
Imagine that. Imagine that. Because, you know, the one thing that it seems to me that they've continually done, even though legislation has made the King James Version, the Bible, the book of the year, and the Bible was declared in, what is it, like 87 or something like that. Yeah, they keep trying to do their best to remove God from pretty much every aspect of everything. It seems to me. Every aspect of everything. And it seemed to me, especially if you see how the left in Hollywood are dancing around now, they're being very blatant about their satanic worship. You know, like they had at I'm led to believe it was Grammys or something a while back, where they had one of the performers was all dressed in red, and all the dancers were all dressed in red, and the stage is all lit up in red. And the song had something to do with Satan or some shit. Yeah, they're being pretty blatant about it, seems to me.
The distinction is one of kind, not one of degree. The violence or rarity of the event is relevant only in considering whether it could or could not have been prevented by reasonable care. If it could not, then it is an act of God, which will relieve from liability.
There you go.
That's just one sentence out of this definition in Black's Law.
Yep. And that gets into possibilities not required by law too, because if it's something that would be impossible for you to pull off, it would be impossible for them to actually hold you accountable for it.
No, Eric, I'm of the opinion, and I think Boris is the same way. You make a color copy of the original. You keep the original files. Okay, Eric, you just popped back in. Sorry, I didn't know you wasn't there. To your question on the original or not, you create a color copy that is an exact duplicate. You keep your original files. That's your evidence.
Yes.
And you would do the same thing on the original as you would on the copy. You don't want to get rid of the original copies. If you give up the original copies, you're giving up your actual evidence.
So I got thrown off again. So you said sign the original, the same thing you sign on the copy, keep the original?
Yeah, you make your color copy. I've got an app where I made a color copy, as in I took a picture. I've got an app on my phone. Anybody can download it, and it's well worth the $10 to buy it. It's called Genius Scan. It's one of the best apps out there it will actually cut the document out of a picture corner to corner. It doesn't matter how crooked you take the picture or how straight it is. It will copy the document out of the picture as a color copy. And you turn it into a PDF front and back with your authenticated documents and everything, and now you have a printable version. Hey, they finally turned the red light on. Good. Get those pallets off so I can get out of here. King, I will say this, King. In those groups you're in where they're telling you all this stuff, if you start telling them to cite their authority on what they say, you probably won't last long in those groups. They'll probably remove you.
Or you could do like I've done, get into one of the calls or one of the conversations and start asking the questions that I ask. And because of the fact that they don't understand and or want to admit to certain things about the system, I get booted.
Yeah, you get booted. I expect the people in my group that I talk to, and I have much respect for a lot of them, even the new people, because they're actually doing the research and they're reading the information, I expect them to come back to me at some point and tell me, I think you're incorrect on this, and show me why. They might be right. I don't know. We'll have to discuss it. But I expect them to come to me. I mean, Popeye's done it before. We have those discussions. But if you're going to say that something's wrong, I don't care who you are, bring the evidence. That's how we learn.
Mhm. Well, that's my position and always has been. I've come to my conclusions based on first-hand experience and a lot of reading. And if somebody can provide evidence to change my mind, well, then great. But my mind is made up based on the conclusions that I have, opinions that I form, are based on solid things that I, like I said before, I can read them on the internet or whatever, point to it. I can give the anecdotal evidence, the first-hand testimony of everything that I've done and all the success I've had, plus the failures. Because even in the failures, I've learned a lot.
Yep. When I started teaching my dad the stuff, I was learning about the citizenship, the birth certificate, trust law, everything. My dad would never, he was very honorable in how he would say it. He would say, okay, I've heard your opinion. Send me the documents. Let me read them. I'd send him the documents. And he would come back and he would say whether he agreed or disagreed. And if he agreed, he'd say, okay, I see where you're getting it from. And he'd come to his own conclusion. We still have those conversations, me and Dad. He will go to a state national conference. Elise did one in the other day in North Carolina. He went to that, and he asked me, do you know her? I said, I don't know. Maybe. Which I don't. And he asked me, why do you have such a problem with them? I said, because they tell just enough truth to sound good with a lot of lies. And I said, and that's the problem. And I started laying out some of the stuff that they say. I said, and what they say doesn't match up with the documentation that I can prove. And I also bothered by them because why? When I've tried to show them the information, they absolutely disregard it and they don't want to hear it. So I have no interest in a cult that you can't even show them the truth.
Well, what you're just saying there, right there, too, is part of the reason why I tell people to don't believe anything that I have to say. Go look this stuff for yourself. Go make it real to you by actually doing your own due diligence.
Yes.
Find out what it takes to actually have a contract, what it actually takes to have a trust. Go and do your own due diligence on what money is, this, that, and the other. All these little things, because then it's going to become real to you. Because now you've done the footwork and you can actually look at it and go, oh, shit, Popeye was right. This is exactly what it says.
Once it becomes real to you, you will be able to articulate it in front of that judge to where that judge will say, okay, I can see where they're coming from. You can now defend it.
Yep. Which is part of the reason why, especially with me, all the different questions and stuff, I've got this stuff down. Because I do know who I am as a player in the game because I spent the time sitting in front of the computer learning this shit. Plus all the time in the courtroom too, but starting off with having to sit in front of the computer, spending hours in front of the computer, reading through codes and statutes and documents and shit.
I'll go ahead and tell y'all. I'll go ahead and warn y'all tomorrow. Y'all probably won't see me on here.
Gonna be home?
No, I don't have enough time to get home, but I am definitely. I got 4 hours and 33 minutes on my 70. So once we leave this location, I'm going to find a decent truck stop, even though they are hard to find. And I got to shut down for at least 34. So I'll be shut down until the 15th. And I'm gonna take the day off, work on my own things, and spend some time with my wife. I've also got an appointment tomorrow for a consultation, and you probably won't see me much other than a comment here and there. When I'm off, I'm off. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. In fact, sometimes, especially when it comes to the business, I'm really about not stepping away completely, and it will interfere. I have to really work on the self to get myself to that point where I just put it all aside to focus on just having some fun for the moment.
I'm actually I've been meditating for a long time on the probate court on which way do I want to go. And I'm actually thinking about changing my tactic, because I keep going back to that thing I showed, that 1551 document in the file section, the real party of interest, where it says in the name of the United States for the use and benefit of the other person. And I really think that's how I need to start off, and then put all the facts and evidence after that.
The only way you're going to know is if you actually do it. If you actually just put it into that practical application and see what happens when the dust settles.
But if I do that, then I'm probably going to have to take it to a federal probate court, which means I'm going to have to find out exactly where that's at.
Yeah, well, of course,
I don't think every district court is a probate court. Does it have the ability to do it? Maybe, but I don't think everyone is.
Well, and too, that with everything that you do, there's always a risk involved.
Absolutely.
There's always a risk involved, and that's the thing that I tell people. The whole reason why I tell people too, if you're going to go into the court for any reason, and you don't have the balls to handle being chucked in a cage, especially if it's a criminal thing, because civil stuff you don't run much risk. You'd have to get really pretty belligerent for a judge to hold you in contempt in a civil court where they actually chuck you in a cage. But
well, I can't put it into court until I notify the parties and see what they accept.
Well, right. I'm just saying in a general sense, though.
Yeah. So before I do that, I got to submit, once I complete the documents, I got to submit it to the proper parties and see what the response turns out to be. And then once you do the administrative process on that, then you can take it to court.
Right. Yeah, and you got to do the administrative process. For all you people that are listening, just know, and this is something that the attorney told me the other day too. She applauded me for having done the administrative process, because she says doing things in writing is the only way. And I basically just pulled her into that one because I already knew that. But I asked her,
is it me or did Popeye just go silent?
Yeah, he just went silent for me as well. I cannot hear him.
Yeah, he just went silent. Yeah, I thought so. Just random thought. Their tracking ability on tracking your location has been so perfected. I was on TikTok the other day just scrolling through videos, and the ads on TikTok changed to the area I was at. I was in Roanoke, Virginia, and the ads changed, started advertising stuff in Roanoke. I said, holy crap. I made the discovery the other day, some of these groups on Telegram, not all of them, some of them are not private. Google has them listed. If it is a public group, it is listed. Google has already got it on their stuff. Found that the other day when I looked up that lady my dad was asking me about. He told me what she goes by. I was doing a search, and Bobby Lawrence's group where he had posted forwarded her post that she sent to him to his group was at the top of the page. Again,
That's not
why
good.
well, again, if they are the arbiters of truth, why are they being pushed and why are they not being censored?
So there's so on Google, I was able to type in a chain of Fibonacci sequence vortex math numbers into the actual Google search bar, and I was able to find the collaborative like public data sharing net between Wikipedia, Google, and maybe like two other agencies that literally was called HUM.news, and then it had like numbers that represented accounts that were humans on iPhones, and it was like a super big vulnerability data breach, but it's in the public because it has to be, but it's not exactly accessible by the public because the public doesn't know to search in Fibonacci sequence vortex math number chains into the Google search bar, and then they also don't know how to process that data. But anybody can go access anybody's location in real time.
Well, you know why they want to trade, why they want everything tied to a phone number, don't you? That phone number is what they type into their system, and everything is umbrellaed under that. Now, what was you going to say? What was you going to say, Christine?
Well, two things. One is on Telegram. If you were DMing someone, when you go in the upper right-hand corner, the three dots that are vertical, there underneath that is what's called a secret chat. And when you secret chat with somebody or DM them, there are 4 emojis that will pop up on the top of your screen and the top of theirs. And if they don't match, then it's not a true confidential chat. But if it is, it's supposedly it is. That was the first thing I was going to say.
So
Second thing,
Apple. Sorry, say what you're saying, then I'll comment. Yeah, sorry.
well, the second thing was for you. That's okay. That's all right. We kind of all jump in. It's just what we do. It's no harm, no foul, I think. But instead of looking up the Fibonacci, why don't you look up the Cristal with a K or the Christos spiral sequence? Because one is organic and the other is inorganic.
Now, on Boslikos Nomos, okay, the main group, Christine, that everybody can join, that is not the Boslikos Nomos chat group. The chat group is tied to it as a private group, okay? So the public page is Boslikos Nomos. The only place you get that secret chat is in private chats. If me and you were sending messages back and forth, yes, you can enable that.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's what I meant when you're DMing someone, like one-on-one, like mine and yours. Yeah.
You have to make the group private, which I did with Boslikos Nomos chat. That's also why I have 2 bots in here to keep the trash out. And it's working very well. They both are.
Yeah, I see the bot pop up and it says you have so and so much time to,
that's one of them.
basically
The other
prove
one,
you're human.
yep, that's one of them, and the other one is Rose, and you have to click if you're human. And Shieldy will ban you if you don't do within 240 seconds. If you don't respond to that, Shieldy will ban you.
Whoa. Okay.
So those bots with the Middle Eastern writings or those scammers that were trying to get in here, that's why yesterday I went and deleted every single invite link that the admins have and refreshed them to have new links. And we haven't seen any more of that today. So we got all that fixed now.
If I can ask a quick question, what were the dates that you said that you may just pop in, but you're not really going to be here because you're going to have some time to yourself?
Tomorrow.
Just tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm not going to be home. I'll be working on some of my own stuff, doing some research on Westlaw, spending some time with my wife, maybe watch some TV. I also got a consultation scheduled tomorrow. And when I park my truck, and I'm out of hours, unless I have something actually scheduled, I do step away a lot of times because I have to. I have to
You
rest
need
my
to.
mind too.
Oh, God, we all do. Absolutely.
I think if you're in Telegram every day, you're doing yourself a disservice. You got to take time away and digest what you're learning.
I totally agree with that. To build a better contextual book in the mind to reference to. But one more thing I wanted to comment on security was that it's my belief that the Apple AI autocorrect is a tracking system that tracks every word that everybody on the Apple iPhone types in and keywords it for security reasons. And then it's also, as well as my belief that an encrypted chat, although the messages between the two users can be encrypted, is that the local server side tracks the keyboard presses and can correlate messages based upon the time they were sent between two parties. Despite the messages being encrypted, which they may, it still doesn't prevent the matter of the fact that they can see what is typed into the keyboard and correlate the data information between two parties. Similarly, there are crypto encrypted applications to message people, but the real security, I believe, is having an iPhone with a protected SIM card with no literally all the Apple features turned off on a privately developed app home screen thing that you can add through Safari that is backed and encrypted by a blockchain that is privatized for the securitization of messaging between two units or parties. So yeah.
Wow, I just realized I can actually view the analytics of this group.
That's cool.
Yeah, it tells me where they're from. I've got 99% of the people are English. There's a small percentage that's Russian and a small percentage that's German. I can even look at text, links, photos, files, videos, music, sticker, GIFs, voice messages, video messages, polls, actions. In other words, it doesn't tell me who's doing what, but it does tell me who the top members are, who is active. Let's see. It says I've got 830 members, which we know that to be true. I got 331 actual viewing members, people that at least open it up and look. But I've only got 78 posting members. I've been saying it for a while. I've only got around 70 regular people because they'll join the lives and they'll talk. And I have been thinking for the last 2 days of going through, the last few weeks, about going through the members list. And if it says on the members list that you haven't been seen in a while, I'm probably just going to remove you.
Hold on a second. There's one deleted account with the little blue ghost. And I think that one's your wife because she went hidden. So please don't delete her.
No, that one
Mama might not be happy
because that account did get deleted. So if that could be the case.
Oh, no.
Well, it would seem.
Did she make another?
She did delete that account.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Pop.
Probably not an answer.
Well, see, hey, when a woman gets upset, they'll do things.
Easy.
Yep.
When a man gets upset, he'll do things too.
Well, this is true. But it seems to me, Preacher, the numbers that you were kind of throwing out there, that's similar in percentages to the couple of business accounts that I have on Telegram. There's a lot of people in the rooms compared to the people that are actually active.
Well, check this out. Let's see. Edit. I didn't even know it was there. Let me see. Oh, wait a minute. No, done. I don't need that. I don't need that. It's right here. Right here. See, it says statistics. Click on the three dots. Check this out. How much growth have I had? See the growth? Group members. Let's see. Joined, invites. How many's left? There's the people of location and everything. And you've got messages. What type of messages? What type of actions? Top hours. I didn't even know this was here. I should start using this to schedule lives during peak times. Didn't even know this was here. And it tells me who the top members are. Cool Fox has been a top member. I don't even make it to the top. Go figure.
Asta, just imagine if you can see that, what them can say. If you want the site to prove that they can get in your phones, if you type Illuminati in backwards and put .com, it's a national intelligence agency.
Oh, yeah. I've known about that, but you also got to look at it with a critical eye, Andy. Did they do that on? See, I know about websites, okay? I can go get a domain name and make it a forwarding domain name. In other words, I set the domain up, but in the system, I make it forward to another domain. So you have to look at it. Did they put it in our face? Possibly. Did somebody do it as a joke? Possibly. But yeah, I know all about that.
I believe the Illuminati would just not let somebody disgrace them like that. I believe it's done intentionally by the NSA to troll the people.
It's possible.
Well,
yes,
one of the things
Dragon
that I
Ball
talk
Z.
about is
Yes.
I talk about full disclosure quite often, and in many different ways there's disclosure. And could it be that's just one more?
I believe they have to
all-seeing eye.
Somewhere. I believe they have to. They have to put everything somewhere for us to see. And
Dragon Ball Z, you need to go change your profile picture. It really should be a picture of Goku.
What's good? What's good, Pastor? What's good, man?
I mean, I loved Dragon Ball Z back in the day. I did. That's why I'm saying it should be Goku.
I might change it.
But yeah, you can't get away from the tracking. The only way you can get away from it is you got to go totally off grid. And it's like I tell people. People say, "I want my freedom." I say, "No, you don't. You don't want to go get you a plot of land. You don't want to give up the internet, give up electricity, and make your own stuff and do your own thing. You like these amenities. So set your structure up right to give you protection."
Exactly true.
Well,
I
this
agree
is
with
part of why I talk about knowing who you are as a player in the game, because like with me, I'm completely aware of it. Like I was saying earlier, I'm pretty sure that the PO had been listening to a call or two, and maybe it infiltrated a group or two because he had used the exact same words that I had used in calls. But with that so-called knowledge, I just figure that this way, because I know who I am as a player in the game and I know the right questions to ask. If anybody ever shows up at the front door or so-called letter comes to the so-called address known to use, because of that simple knowledge, I know the right questions to ask. And it's just that simple. And I don't worry about something until it starts to happen, because why worry about anything until it's right in your face?
Yeah, today has enough to worry about. We don't need to worry about tomorrow. Hey, Mark, How you doing, brother?
When you want to be in
I'm
a moment.
So
I'm doing all right, preacher. Just walked in the door, thought I'd get on here and see if anybody was chatting, and sure enough, there you are.
Heard any responses back on the letters yet? Any more responses?
Well, actually, I hadn't been to the mailbox, but I have got a green card return showing somebody received something, but no, I hadn't heard from nobody.
By the way, you don't drive that truck no more. Did you sell it?
Yeah, it's sold.
Darn it. I was going to say, I really need a good W9.
Brother, it was a Hoss. 565 Cummins, 18 speed, 373 rear ends. They didn't know it had a hill in front of it.
Hey, it'd have more room than this grain hauler, this International.
Oh yeah, I had the studio sleeper in that one.
That's what I want, is a studio sleeper. Absolutely.
And if you drove it,
I am not a Peterbilt guy. I mean, the Peterbilts, you're buying a name, but they are never big on room. They look nice.
No.
They look freaking awesome with all the chicken lights. They just ain't got no room. I'd rather have the W9.
Well, my W9 had all the chicken lights too, brother. Breather lights down the side. It was nice.
So, yeah, Mark is we sent, he can tell you the story. He's one of those that we sent his tax bill to the trustees and said, hey, it's your obligation here.
And I haven't heard a word from them since.
Silence acquiescence. I was gonna say, what about billing the? Well, I guess you don't want to bill the Treasury for doing your taxes. That's something you would bill the IRS for.
No,
but
you bill the IRS if they come to audit you. Ask them where they're going to do it. At your office. Okay, no problem. We'll do it at the office. My rate is $500 an hour for my time. One guy did it. He did it. You got to do it at a reasonable rate. You can't do it ungodly. He actually told the IRS, he said, my rate is $1,800 an hour for my time, and my time is valuable. And they wrote him a letter back and said, due to unforeseen circumstances, we will be canceling your audit, and we will let you know when we'll do it. They didn't want to have to pay him $1,800 an hour to do an audit.
Yo, Paz, you were talking about truck efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's that like? Like, are you can just modify the truck to make it more efficient, right?
You could, but some modifications the government will definitely fine you for. Like, we have EGR and DPF and the DEF system. You can do a delete on the truck, is what we call it. Go get the computer flash to have all the parameters to where it will run without that system, and it will actually make the truck last longer and give it better fuel mileage. The DEF system is terrible on these trucks, but you were going to get fined $10,000-$20,000 by the EPA if you do it. Now, also, you can change and do modifications. A buddy of mine did that on his truck. He took the engine fan. You'll like this, Mark. He took the engine fan off of the truck, and he put 4 electric fans. You know those fans on a what are they? The APUs. You know that rectangle fan that's for the APUs that you see out there, Mark. He took 4 of those and put them behind the radiator, and put them on an electric switch that when the computer tells it to turn on, those 4 fans turn on. That means you're not losing horsepower. He also took the condenser off of the front of the truck, moved it to the back on the cab, and put 4 fans over that, because what does the AC condenser do? It sucks heat out of the cab. And where is it putting the heat? Right into the radiator, into the engine, right? Well, him doing those 2 modifications alone Cost him about 10 grand. It made his fuel mileage between 8.5 and 9 miles to the gallon. He had his truck leased on to one company. They had him investigated for stealing fuel. They said there is no way you're getting that kind of fuel mileage. And he proved it to them. He showed them what he did. They were blown away. And he's got this stuff patented, but nobody will touch it because why? They don't care about fixing the fuel mileage. Why? You'll pay less in taxes. Fuel tax.
When a truck's engine fan is running, it reduces the horsepower by 18 to 20%.
About 75 to 100 horsepower, depending on the motor. Which means what? You're going to lose fuel mileage.
But with that W9 I had, even though it had the big front end on it, it wasn't aerodynamic. With the 565 engine, the way I drove that truck, I could average between 6.2 to 6.5 miles a gallon with that truck because I figured out how to drive it.
Yeah. Shifting the gears right, keeping the RPMs right, cruise control, all that stuff matters.
Yeah, my friend had a.
I actually get 6.5 to 7 on this one. Now, if I'm empty, I'll get closer to 8. If I'm bobtailing, I'll get over 9. So weight and all these factors play into it.
Some people are able to modify the timing of their turbocharged engines with the torque